Welcome, everyone, to the Education for Innovation Digital Town Hall at the Newseum in downtown Washington, D.C. This event is a partnership of the Aspen Institute, Intel, ITIF, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, and the PBS NewsHour. I'm Hari Srinivasan, correspondent for the PBS NewsHour. Today, we're going to take a look at how to educate the next generation of innovators to keep the U.S. globally competitive. Can innovation be taught? What are the keys to helping students excel in science, technology, engineering, and math? How do U.S. students compare to those in the rest of the world? We're honored to have as our guest today the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, along with some leaders from the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, who will reveal the results of a new education study, the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA. How do U.S. students compare to students around the world in reading, math, and science literacy? Also, Robert Atkinson, the president of ITIF, will reveal the results of a study on how to refuel the U.S. innovation economy. My PBS NewsHour colleague, Gwen Eiffel, will have an extended conversation with Secretary Duncan. And for a global perspective, Walter Isaacson, president of the Aspen Institute, will interview author and New York Times columnist Tom Friedman. Throughout the event, we'll be joined by students, faculty, and administrators at two schools which exemplify the best practices in science, technology, engineering, and math education. The School of Science and Engineering Magnet in Dallas, Texas, and Olin College of Engineering in Needham, Massachusetts. We'll learn more about those schools and what makes them special later in the program. Here in our audience, we have media and invited guests who follow education, particularly the sciences, technology, engineering, and math. So that people online may join in the conversation and ask questions of our guests, we are streaming the video of this event. To join, log on to theinnovationeconomy.org or tweet your thoughts using the hashtag #EdForInnovation. That's ED and the number 4, innovation. We've got a very full program planned, so let's begin with Karen Kornbluh, the U.S. Permanent Representative to the U.S. Mission to the OECD, which provides a setting where governments compare policy experiences, seek answers to common problems, identify best practices, and coordinate domestic and international policies. Ambassador Kornbluh.
Thank you, Hari. Thank you also to Walter Isaacson and the Aspen Institute, Intel, Gwen Eiffel and the PBS NewsHour, and ITIF for your leadership. I also want to recognize Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, who along with his talented staff conceived this event to continue the conversation that they've started with the American people about education reform. I'm privileged to represent the U.S. at the OECD, which was created after World War II to dispense Marshall Plan aid to devastated Europe. Today, the U.S. continues to work at the OECD with other countries to continue sharing best practices for increasing economic growth and growing good jobs. Although education might not have been seen as important to economic growth, today it certainly is. As President Obama said yesterday, we face a Sputnik moment. We must invest in innovation, and most especially in education. The OECD agrees. Last week, in a report, it found investment in human capital is a critical ingredient for growth. The education data we'll discuss today is so important that we worked with the White House Data.gov group so that today we can announce that the 2009 PISA data will be available for download on Data.gov, where it will be accessible to parents, teachers, and other stakeholders. Then in June, thanks to the Hewlett Foundation, individual students will be able to take the PISA test so that they, entire schools and entire districts, can find out how they measure internationally. Now it's my pleasure to introduce OECD Secretary General Angel Gurria, a man who has provided such extraordinary leadership at the OECD that he was selected unanimously by the member countries to lead it for the next 5 years. He's a man of tremendous accomplishments. He served as Mexico's Minister of Foreign Affairs and its Minister of Finance. He oversaw Mexico's economic recovery and its return to international markets following the crisis of the 90s. Secretary General Gurria is a dynamic leader, perfect for an organization adjusting to a rapidly globalizing world. Over the last year, under his watch, the OECD has added members and enhanced partnerships with the large emerging economies. The OECD has been engaged by the G20 on vital issues, and it's promoting a new paradigm in development. Thanks to Secretary General Gurria's dedication, vision, and energy, the OECD is today a globally relevant, high-impact player. He's also been a dedicated champion of education, and this carries special weight coming from a former finance minister. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you my good friend and the OECD Secretary General, Angel Gurria.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kornbluh. Secretary Duncan, ladies and gentlemen, first thing I'm going to do is going to deliver to Secretary Duncan. This is the sixth volume because the first five were about the results themselves. This is a special volume. It says Strong Performance and Successful Reformers in Education, Lessons from PISA for the United States. So, Secretary. Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure for me to present results from the OECD's new PISA survey. Education is the single most critical investment to raise the long-term growth potential of countries. In the global economy, the performance of the education system is a yardstick for success, particularly in light of the fundamental technological and demographic challenges that are reshaping our economies. By testing around 500,000 high school students from over 70 countries, which account for 9/10 of the world economy, PISA provides the most comprehensive and rigorous international assessment of learning outcomes in education. By emphasizing the creativity of students, specifically the ability of 15-year-old students to extrapolate and apply their knowledge to novel situations, PISA offers a unique assessment of students' way of thinking, the ways of working, and their career readiness. Let me share with you some of the key conclusions. The new PISA identifies several top flyers: Shanghai, Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, Finland, Canada, Japan, New Zealand. Of course, the precise ranking varies according to the test in question, ranging from reading literacy to math or science. However, these countries stand out as the strongest overall performers. With cultural heritages and economic systems differ, yes, but the tests are adapted to each one of the countries, and but we find common traits. All the countries share a common denominator. They all manage to have strong and equitable learning outcomes. In math, for example, more than a quarter of Shanghai's 15-year-olds can conceptualize, generalize, and creatively use information. Finland shows consistently high performance regardless of where its children go to school. PISA provides measurable benchmarks of existing differences. It does not pick up one model. Instead, it offers many options, thus helping countries adapt ideas to their own conditions and set out their own priorities and policy targets. There's a lot we can learn from each other, from how to make students learn better, to how to make teachers teach better, or school systems perform more effectively. The stakes are huge. In some countries, improving the efficiency of the education system would be equivalent to gaining several years of schooling. This is not only a matter of resources. Indeed, PISA shows that two similarly prosperous countries can produce very different educational results. For education authorities, this represents both a warning and an opportunity. Secretary Duncan said yesterday that this was a massive wake-up call. And as Ambassador Kornbluh said, the President said it's a Sputnik moment. Well, high-income countries can no longer take for granted that they will forever keep their comparative advantage in human capital. As global competition intensifies and demand patterns change, they will need to work hard to maintain their edge. At the same time, PISA shows that countries with limited resources can improve their educational performances and aim for excellence. So this is the main message for PISA in general. Stay ambitious, work harder to reach your full potential, no matter how you come out in the picture. So where does the U.S. stand in this all? Overall, the U.S. comes out as an average performer in reading, 14 out of the 34 members of the OECD. In science, exactly in the middle, 17 out of the 34. And the U.S. drops below the OECD average in math. It's 25 out of 34. Also, there's a very wide gap between the top 10% and the bottom 10% of 15-year-olds in the U.S., similar to that observed between top and bottom performing PISA countries. Now, unlike most other federal nations, the U.S. does not yet collect PISA data for individual states. We now have it in 4 different regions, but of course the clustering of the regions comes out a little predictable. We all know what the regional characteristics are, and we have been talking to Secretary Duncan about doing a PISA, like right now we have 70 countries, 74 countries. What if we did 50 states? And then we could look in great depth and in great detail at each one of the states of the United States. And we would then be able to really fine-tune the policy recommendations. So this is maybe the next step after today. Measuring performances over time highlights the crucial importance of policy choices in education. Because, once we've had now 10 years, so we've been tracking performance over time. Luckily, our 10-year experience with PISA allows us to offer some interesting insights in this regard. And the good news from our findings is that even in a short time span, countries can make huge progress. Consider Korea, where average performance was already high in 2000. They did pretty well. Yet one reason for policy concerns was that only a small elite achieved excellence in reading literacy. Very, very few. Within less than a decade, Korea has doubled its share of students demonstrating reading excellence. It focused exactly on that. It made that a target and got it. Another interesting example is Poland. The overhaul of the Polish school system dramatically reduced performance variability among schools over the past years, ultimately raising overall performance by the equivalent of more than half a school year. This is for all the system. It's an enormous progress in a country that is already relatively mature, European country, that's been at it in terms of education for a long time. What Poland did was to remove a secondary school track designed for students with lower performance expectations. They eliminated that. This eliminated the possibility for teachers and schools to turn away students from disadvantaged social backgrounds. They now have to offer high-quality learning opportunities to all students, but also to help students who are struggling in order to do better. The examples I've just mentioned underscore PISA's greatest value. It serves as a source of inspiration for policymakers. It is in this spirit that Secretary Duncan asked the OECD to distill some of PISA's key lessons. What can be drawn from the top-performing education systems? What lessons have we learned? What can the U.S. learn from some of these success stories and some not so successful stories? That was in April when we talked about this, and today I'm pleased to deliver these strong performance and successful reformers. The report that I delivered to Secretary Duncan was prepared to answer Mr. Duncan's request. And let me share a few of the highlights. First, make education a priority. Strong performer is a country that has made education one of its flagships. They made it a Sputnik moment. Yet that alone doesn't get you very far. In some countries, students are separated into different tracks at an early age because of the erroneous notion that only a subset of children can achieve world-class standard. Now, this happens in some very important European countries today. It's not theoretical and doesn't happen in, remote destinations. However, PISA shows that those systems tend to be fraught with large social disparities and freeze such disparities over time. That means the system does not help you overcome the disparities. In top-performing systems, most students achieve high standards. Second, don't be shy. High-performing education systems do not refrain from setting out clear and ambitious standards. They are focused on the acquisition of complex, higher-order thinking skills, which they align across the system. As a result, everybody has a shared sense of what is required to move on to the next academic level in terms of content, but also in terms of performance. Students know what they have to do to realize their dreams, and they put in the work that is needed to achieve those dreams. Third, teachers' quality pays. Strong education systems pay careful attention to the profile of their teachers. Much like corporations, they make sure that their teaching force is the best. Careful consideration must go into making the teaching profession attractive, recruiting and selecting teachers, rewarding and training them on the job, recognizing the best performance, and helping those who have merits but may be struggling. Fourth, the importance of autonomy. Talking about schools here. High-performing systems provide considerable discretion to school heads and school faculties in determining content in the curriculum. Indeed, PISA shows that autonomy is closely related to school performance, provided, of course, that it is achieved under conditions of effective accountability. That said, we do not see a performance advantage of privately managed schools once social background is accounted for. Last but not least, equity is a key. World-class education systems deliver high-quality learning consistently across the entire education system. To this end, they invest educational resources where they can make the most difference by attracting the most talented teachers into the most challenging classrooms, by making effective spending choices that prioritize the quality of teachers. The U.S. stands out as one of the 3 PISA countries where disadvantaged children from poor families have access to fewer teachers. Yet this disadvantage can be overcome. Even in the U.S., a quarter of 15-year-olds enrolled in disadvantaged schools reach the average performance standards of Finland. Indeed, the U.S. has many assets to leverage public education. One key is the amount of financial resources American citizens are willing to invest in public education, the second highest level when measured in per student terms among the PISA countries. A second great asset is the United States' history of ongoing and far-reaching reform in education. In many cases, school leaders, educators, governors, and lawmakers implemented sweeping changes. I welcome Race to the Top, which in little more than a year has had major effects, including on state legislations and the capacity of state systems to carry reforms. It shows what can be achieved under conditions of effective leadership and incentives. The third great asset is the American education system's capacity to adjust and innovate. The U.S. educational system has been a global reference for countries in their quest for fresh, exciting, and useful ideas in education. So the U.S. is well equipped to accelerate educational progress and demonstrate what can be learned from school systems within and beyond its own borders to boost student learning. Mr. Secretary, Madam Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased that the presentation of the new PISA coincides with the OECD celebrating its 50th anniversary. At 50, we strive to stay young and relevant. We are still developing our indicators, inventing new tools, increasing our reach. I'm also especially pleased to share this valuable tool with you at a time when policymakers across the globe are dealing with and debating how to revive growth and how to ensure a better distribution of its fruits while facing very tight budgets. PISA shows that education has a place at the heart of this debate. I hope that this new PISA will help you find new solutions. In the U.S., as much as elsewhere, this is being rolled out in all the capitals, or at least in many of the capitals of the world, has been rolled out in places like Sydney, Australia, or Paris, in Berlin, London, etc. The future depends on us doing things differently. One is, of course, always looking to do things differently, but hopefully we can also do them better. PISA is talking to us with all its numbers, with all its information. It's telling us things. PISA is telling us what has to be done. So let's listen carefully and act swiftly. Thank you. I now have the honor of introducing Arnie Duncan, Secretary of Education of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I can assure you the OCD is both young and absolutely relevant. And from a couple brief conversations, it's interesting. Some folks say, oh, it's a great idea, nothing happens. You guys have done an extraordinary amount of work over the past 6, 7, 8 months. And I have to tell you, someone stuck me an early copy of the Lessons for the United States yesterday, and I stayed up half the night reading it, and it's fascinating reading. It's something that I think all of us who are interested in improving the quality of education need to read. So thank you so much for your leadership, and Ambassador Kornbluh, thank you so much for being here as well today. Since the OECD first implemented PISA in 2000, it has mushroomed to 60 countries and 5 non-national entities, such as Shanghai. It's fast becoming the measuring rod by which countries track trends in national performance and assess college and career readiness of students as they near the end of their compulsory education and prepare to participate in the global economy. Here in the United States, we have looked forward eagerly to the 2009 PISA results. But the findings, I have to admit, show that the United States needs to urgently accelerate student learning to try to remain competitive in the knowledge economy of the 21st century. Frankly, the United States has a long way to go before it lives up to the American dream and the promise of education being the great equalizer. Every 3 years, PISA assesses the reading, mathematics, and scientific literacy of 15-year-olds. It provides crucial information about how well our students are prepared to do the sorts of reading, math, and science that will be demanded of them in post-secondary education or on the job market and as young adults in our modern society. Unfortunately, the 2009 PISA results show that American students are poorly prepared to compete in today's knowledge economy. President Obama has repeatedly warned that the nation that out-educates us today will out-compete us tomorrow. And the PISA results, to be brutally honest, show that a host of developed nations are out-educating us. Finland, South Korea, and Canada are consistent high performers. And the jewel of China's education system, Shanghai, debuted this year as the highest scoring participant globally. With the exception of some improvements in science from 2006 to 2009, U.S. performance on the PISA has been largely stagnant. The U.S. is not among the top performing OECD nations in any of the subjects tested by PISA, though the United States students express more self-confidence in their academic skills than students in virtually all other OECD nations. And this stunning finding, the OECD suggests, may be explained because students here have been commended for work that would not be acceptable in high-performing education systems. The hard truth is that other high-performing nations have passed us by during the past 2 decades. Americans need to wake up to this educational reality instead of napping at the wheel while emerging competitors prepare their students for economic leadership. The basic findings of the 2009 PISA for the United States are as follows. In reading literacy, 15-year-old American students were average performers among the 34 OECD nations. The U.S. effectively showed no change in reading skills since 2000. And overall, U.S. students ranked 14th. In mathematics, U.S. 15-year-olds are below average performers among OECD nations. After a dip in our 2006 math scores, U.S. students returned to the same level of performance in 2009 as 6 years earlier in 2003. Still, we rank a lowly 25th in math. The most encouraging finding from PISA is that our average science score is up. In 2006, American 15-year-olds had below average skills in scientific literacy compared to their peers. Today, U.S. students have improved enough to become average performers in science among OECD nations, currently ranking 17th. Still, I don't think that's much for us to celebrate. Being average in science is a mantle of mediocrity, and especially in a knowledge economy where scientific literacy is so central to sustaining innovation and international competitiveness. I would caution you against making too much of small gradations in rankings. they're not that meaningful. But the gap between top-performing countries and the United States is meaningful and it's large. To take one example, OECD analysis suggests that 15-year-olds in Korea and Finland are, on average, 1 to 2 years ahead of their American peers in both math and science. As disturbing as these national trends are for America, enormous achievement gaps among Black and Hispanic students portend to even more trouble for the United States if we don't change in the years ahead. Last year, McKinsey & Company released an analysis which concluded that America's failure to close achievement gaps has imposed, and this is a quote, the economic equivalent of a permanent national recession. So the big picture from PISA is one of educational stagnation at a time of fast rising demand for highly educated workers. The mediocre performance of American students is a problem we cannot afford to accept and we cannot afford to ignore. In a highly competitive, knowledge-based economy, simply maintaining the educational status quo means American students are effectively losing ground. And that is one reason why I asked OECD earlier this year to prepare the study of what the United States could learn from the education systems of higher-performing nations. That study, as the Secretary General discussed, is absolutely rich with lessons for the United States. But a recurring theme that stands out is that much of the conventional wisdom about the barriers to dramatically accelerating achievement here in the United States are mistaken. The chief reason that U.S. students lag behind their peers in high-performing countries is not their diversity or the fact that a significant number of public school students come from disadvantaged backgrounds. The problem, OECD concludes, is that socioeconomic disadvantage leads more directly to poor educational performance here in the United States than is the case in many other countries. Disadvantaged Canadians are much less at risk of poor educational performance than their counterparts here. Our schools, in other words, are not doing nearly as much as they could to close achievement gaps. As school children age in America, they make less progress each year than children in the best-performing countries. By contrast, high-performing countries not only dramatically boost student achievement, they do so while closing achievement gaps at the same time. In Finland, there are consistent, strong, and predictable educational outcomes for children regardless of where those children go to school. The OECD study also finds that more resources are not the simple answer for America's educational shortcomings. As the Secretary General said, the U.S. spends more per student than any OECD nation except Luxembourg. Students in Estonia and Poland perform at roughly the same level as those here in the United States, even though Estonia and Poland spend less than half as much per student. High-performing countries tend to invest strategically very differently than us. For example, many prioritize higher teacher salaries over smaller class sizes. More broadly, they absolutely professionalize the teaching profession. The real problem of K-12 spending here is our low educational productivity. Unlike high-performing systems, we achieve less per dollar invested. And we do less to target spending on the most challenged students in the most challenged schools. As the Secretary General said, all OECD nations except the United States, Israel, and Turkey devote as much or more to schools facing the biggest socioeconomic challenges as they do to schools with more privileged students. Most countries invest money where the challenges are the greatest, and they put in place incentives and support systems that attract the most talented teachers and encourage them to go into the most difficult classrooms. Here in the United States, we are at best in our infancy in this critically important work. Let me just say in closing that I was struck by the convergence between the practices of high-performing countries and many of the reforms that state and local leaders have pursued in the last 2 years in adopting the Common Core standards and in competing for the Race to the Top program, school turnaround grants, and the Teacher Incentive Fund. Almost all high-performing education systems set rigorous, shared academic standards for student success. Thanks to the courage and the commitment of our nation's governors, state school chief officers, state school boards, and state lawmakers, 40 states and the District of Columbia this year have adopted the Common Core standards in English and math. That's an absolute game changer. This will largely put an end to the insidious practice of dumbing down academic standards and lying to children and lying to families simply to make politicians look good. The OECD reported that virtually every high-performing country they studied, and this is a quote, mirrors Race to the Top's efforts to support the recruitment, development, rewarding, and retaining of effective teachers and principals. So yes, our policies are moving us in the right direction. But the practices of high-performing countries show clearly that America, in particular, has to do much more to elevate the teaching profession, from the recruitment and the training of teachers to their evaluation and professional development. The United States has a lot to learn from South Korea, Singapore, and Finland about building the teaching profession and recruiting teachers from the ranks of top students. In high-performing countries, teachers are typically recruited from the top third of students. In Finland, it's the top 10% of students who vie for the opportunity to become teachers. And before they even enter the classroom, they receive great, rigorous clinical training. In the U.S., clinical training is often haphazard and of uneven quality. High-performing countries have moved away from the century-old factory model of education that is still too often used in much of our country. In countries that are out-educating us, teachers are often thought of as nation builders. Unlike in the U.S., meaningful evaluations, compensation for highly effective teachers, and high-quality professional development are all embedded in the job. In the United States, our system far too often fails to provide meaningful evaluation and incentives for the most effective teachers to teach the most challenged students. Too often, we treat teachers as if they were interchangeable widgets in a school assembly line. Americans take real pride in the idea that our nation is exceptional. And it's true that our education has unique strengths. We have rich resources, an unmatched tradition of innovation, and a higher education system that is still the finest in the world. Never before have we had so many pockets of excellence in the K-12 system that can point the way for excellence in our schools. The PISA results show that about 25% of American students enrolled in high-poverty schools reach the average performance of students in Finland, one of the world's most high-achieving nations. That is absolutely encouraging. But we must raise our sights, and our goal must be to be great again. To lead the world in achievement and college attainment, success must become the norm, not the exception. It's time to acknowledge that much of our pre-K-12 system is not exceptional. The highest performing, most rapidly improving countries have a great deal to learn from one another. To continue and deepen that conversation, we, together with the OECD and other partners, will convene an international summit on the teaching profession in New York in March to bring together ministers of education and national teacher union leaders from these countries. I have every confidence that America can capitalize on our strengths, adapt where we need to, and learn from others. And we've done so before. The U.S. currently has many of the world's top research universities. But a century ago, we adopted the concept of a research university from Germany. Vocational and technical education in the U.S. has its roots in Scotland's mechanical institutes, which were then on the cutting edge of technology training. Our leading prep schools are modeled after England's. Today, America has to study and learn from other nations once again. The need is urgent and the opportunity is unique. Our children only have one chance to get a great education. As Dr. Martin Luther King famously said, he couldn't wait for justice to prevail. And as a nation, we can no longer wait to improve our schools that deny children the opportunity for a world-class education. Our children, our country, deserve the best. Thank you so much.
Now I want to invite Secretary General Gurria and Ambassador Kornbluh to join Secretary Duncan here, and we'll take questions from the press. And those in the back should come up to the, I don't know if we have a microphone or not, but we've got mic runners. So later on we'll give the online and studio audience a chance to ask questions as well. So from this press section there, go ahead, sir.
Hi, this is Jeff Mervis with Science Magazine. This is for Secretary Duncan.
I'm sorry, can you stand up just so we can see you?
Several recent reports have called for spending a couple of billions of dollars a year to improve science and math education and the system of training the teachers who teach those students. President's Council of Advisors made a recommendation for more STEM schools, for rewarding excellent teachers. The Academy report from 2005 said that its recommendations have not been implemented and that there's a need for several $1 billion a year more in spending. Given the budget constraints, do you think that efforts to improve STEM education and teaching the teachers who will do that should be exempt from a freeze on domestic discretionary spending? And do you think that more than just pilot programs that are awarded to individual states and individual districts need to be done? In other words, a sustained national effort.
So we're starting with the easy ones.
The President has repeatedly said that education is an investment, not an expense. And we can't simply invest in the status quo. We have to invest in getting dramatically better. And last year, when most of discretionary spending was frozen, we had a significant increase in our budget. And we want to invest, we're asking from Congress for this next year, an additional $1 billion. One of the biggest concerns I've heard is about a narrowing of the curriculum. And yes, reading and math are hugely important, but so is science and social studies. It's not the topic today, but foreign languages and arts and dance and drama and music. We're asking for $1 billion to invest in what we call a well-rounded education, and the STEM fields are a huge part of that. So yes, we need to invest, but let me be clear, not in the status quo, in doing things very differently.
Anybody else from this section? Yes, sir. Go ahead and stand up and identify yourself.
My name is Gregorio Meraz. I'm a reporter with Televisa Mexico. I would like to ask Mr. Gurria, how concerning is that Mexico is in the last position of the OECD, and what they can do to make more efficient the budget for education? And Mr. Secretary Duncan, I would like to ask you, what do you think is possible to do in order to avoid the dropouts of Hispanics and black students in the schools?
Well, first of all, in the case of Mexico in particular, we can see that their expense in education is actually at or above the average. It's around 6% of their GDP. So it doesn't mean that they're spending less. What happens is the impact of the spending may not be the appropriate one. In Mexico, the culture of evaluation is not as well established, particularly among the teachers. And, this is something that was in Finland, for example. The question of evaluation was born with the system. It's being done all the time. So what is common to all these systems that do well, and that, of course, is something that the Mexicans, but everybody else have to take into account, is that the systems can be very different. They can be very decentralized or very centralized. And they can be with great autonomy, but they all have certain common features. The administrative and the even political context can be different, but they have common features, and those features, like the ones we saw here, of giving autonomy to the schools, to the principals, of reducing the inequalities, like was mentioned in the study about the case of Shanghai, where they send the teams of the better performing schools to the worst performing schools. After a while of doing that, obviously you have a much more homogeneous system, and a more homogeneous system will yield better results. These things can be observed, and they can be practiced, and they can be picked up independently. They don't need to be part of a complete change of the system.
On the dropout rates, just to give the statistics, they're absolutely devastating. As a country, we have about a 25% dropout rate. We're losing about 1 million young people each year from our schools to our streets. That is economically unsustainable and is morally unacceptable. There are no good jobs, none, for a high school dropout in today's knowledge-based economy. In many of our minority communities, African American and Latino, those dropout rates approach 40, 50, even 60% in some places. Absolutely devastating. So the status quo, again, is fundamentally broken. How do we improve it? A couple things. You heard earlier about how raising expectations is hugely important. Giving students access to high-quality classes, AP classes, building a college-going culture from the earliest grades is hugely important. Many of our students grow up in poverty, making sure they have the wraparound services, the support. There's a lack of fathers in many of the households? Where are the mentors? Where are the role models? Where are the coaches? So I think personal relationships, both rigor, but then personal relationships are hugely important. If students need health care, we need to get them that. If students need eyeglasses, we need to get them that. If they're not being fed, we need to give them that. If they're not safe, we have to work on school safety. And so you really have to take a holistic approach. There's not one simple solution, but I'd say those two things, dramatically raising expectations and doing much more to create a holistic, supportive environment for students is hugely important. Race to the Top has gotten all the press. That's okay. That's $4 billion. We've invested $4 billion in turning around the bottom 5% in the schools in the country. This is some of the hardest, most important work going on right now. 2,000 high schools, not that many, 2,000 high schools produce half our nation's dropouts and 75% from the Black and Latino community. And if we can turn around those high schools and then their feeder middle schools and elementary schools, we will change not just those children's lives, we will change those communities for decades to come. So a massive investment. For the first time, our country is in the business of turning around low-performing schools. And we're going to learn a lot this year. We're going to get some things right. We're going to make some mistakes. But 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're going to be dramatically better at turning it around. So huge courage going on at the local level. The final thing I would say, one thing that we're debating right now, and I'm fighting very for, is I think we have to pass the DREAM Act. And there are many young Hispanic students who do well, who are working extraordinarily hard. I had many of them who are my students in the Chicago Public Schools who played by all the right rules, got great grades, were leaders in the community, started to approach high school graduation, knew they couldn't go to college, and they gave up. They despaired. And we lose dropouts not just among struggling students. It's actually almost unique. We lose Hispanic dropouts who are A students, who say, why bother? And so passing the DREAM Act soon, I think, is a piece of this equation.
Harry, if we just to be fair to the Mexicans, they are the single country that made the greatest progress in math in the last 3 years. So it's a relative question. This is not about rankings. The results tell you what it is that you have to address, and you can measure yourself against the last result. But don't be complacent if you turn out to be a little better than the last time, because everybody else is running real fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ms. Kornbluh, I wanted to ask also, so what are some of the key learnings that we can see from this study to take back to our own education system? That the example that Secretary General just gave about trying to take those teachers and those kind of key learnings from their own high-performing schools to low-performing ones in Shanghai. But what else?
So Andreas Schlaker, who's here, who's done the hard work of getting the PISA results together, walked me through this in great detail. And I would say I simplified it for myself to 4 A's: access to the best teachers and supporting them and treating them like knowledge workers, as the Secretary was saying, not like industrial era workers where you just tell them what to do every day and they go out and do it. Really giving them a career path and investing in them. And then another A, ambition, really having the kind of ambition to say we're going to set high standards, we're going to be the best, we're not going to be complacent. And then number 3, accountability and autonomy for schools. Again, in this knowledge-based world, you're not treating the school like a piece of a machine. But you're giving it autonomy, you're giving it accountability, and then you're giving it incentives. And then the last A would be all, which would be universal success that you want to invest. One of the most interesting things about this study is that there's not a trade-off between equity and quality. That Brazil, for example, got much better. They're still low, but they got much better on both of those two qualities. They got much better in general, and then they got better for their worst students. And one of the most discouraging things about this, as the Secretary was saying, is we're one of the only countries where the social outcomes get worse for the lowest. Instead of adding extra resources and helping them more to overcome their background, our education system is really failing them. So I think we need to learn from these 4 A's to figure out how to do better.
Okay. One more question from the press, and we'll open up to the audience. Anybody back? All right, then we'll... yes, ma'am.
Amanda Ripley from Time Magazine. I just wanted to ask, we talk a lot about the achievement gap, which is obviously very important, but the PISA results also show that the U.S. is not even competing with the top countries in the world at the top. So we have disproportionately fewer kids performing at the top in math, for example. What do we do about that? I mean, is there something specific, particularly as we look towards the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind, with considering that deficiency?
So that's another hour-long conversation. I'll try and be brief. I'll say, again, where I started, that what we've had over the past 6, 7, 8 years is a dumbing down of standards. that hurts all children. It hurts disadvantaged children, but it hurts the high flyers as well. And to see states finally step up and reverse that, and have 40 states adopting higher college and career-ready standards, is an absolute game changer. That's going to help every single child, but particularly those ones who were relatively higher performing, but against international comparisons, again, weren't anywhere near to where they needed to be. So a much higher bar, I think, benefits everyone. We're coming back with this next generation of assessments. Again, and all this is being led by the states. Just tremendous leadership and courage. Governors, state school chief officers, local superintendents are driving that. So I think over the next couple years, there'll be a little time of transition, but this is going to change education for decades to come. Finally, No Child Left Behind, much of it is broken. And we absolutely want to fix it, and we want to reauthorize this year and do it in a bipartisan way. So we have a huge opportunity. But it's interesting, we hear some of the complaints we're hearing now, No Child Left Behind actually reinforces those. It doesn't give that autonomy at the local level. It's very prescriptive, very top-down from Washington. I always tell the story that I almost had to sue the Department of Education for the right to tutor my children after school. I had tens of thousands of poor children who wanted to go to school longer hours, and I got in this massive battle with the Department of Education. I won. That was lucky, but I shouldn't have had to fight that battle. So we can make No Child Left Behind have a high bar, but give much more local flexibility, give that autonomy, couple that with greater accountability. I think in many other things we're trying to do, we can take away the perverse incentives that exist today, really empower great teachers, great principals, give them the room to move with a high bar, and then learn from those examples of success. No Child Left Behind was all about labeling schools failures. Yes, we got to challenge the status quo, it's not working, but there are so many good schools that are doing a great job now. We're not learning from them, we're not incenting that, we're not encouraging that. Let's capture that and share that. So a huge opportunity in the new year, working together in a bipartisan way to reauthorize and fix much of what's broken today and much of what is hurting our country long term in terms of our economy.
Hari, can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
One of the things that's really interesting is that most people don't know how well their school is doing. So parents are not empowered. They just don't know. They may think, well, those other schools aren't doing well, but my school is doing terrific. I mean, as you were saying, kids have great confidence that they're doing better than they think, but parents, too, I think, just don't have the information they need. And so one of the exciting things about the fact that this data is now online and that by June the OECD has been working to make it possible for students to take the test themselves. So, you can imagine a time when a whole school can take the test and see how it ranks internationally. That data in the hands of parents could be so powerful.
Right, we're going to open it up to audience questions as well. Go ahead. Watch the jib there. You're a tall man.
Mr. Secretary, Roger Sidoti, principal, right from the trenches, principal at Theodore Roosevelt High School, Kent, Ohio, 40 years in public education, and we're a race to the top school district, and I appreciate all of the support that our federal government is providing us. You said a lot of things that I agree with almost all of them. The one thing you said, you talked about teacher education and providing teachers with some kind of a feeling, I think you said pride. You talked about national, they're almost like developing nation builders. Well, in America, it seems to me, and I've been doing this now for 40 years, that somewhere we haven't quite had that focus. I recruit teachers. I've hired probably thousands of teachers. And it's interesting. I don't know if we have that common focus. What might our leader, our president, what might our federal government do to begin to develop a common culture within our country that really does talk to that nation building? Because it kind of seems we're in sometimes we're so free that we sometimes have so many diverse opinions that we never get to that common good. So how might we change that conversation, and what might I do after 40 years slugging it around there in the public schools to try to help that effort?
Give us another 40 years. So it sounds like you're doing great work.
I'm getting old.
No. Thanks for your leadership, and thanks for everything you're doing on a daily basis. So none of these have easy answers, but I think we have beaten down the teaching profession. And I think, again, in places like, I was just struck, again, all these conversations with Andres and Secretary General just been so influential for me. When I heard in South Korea, teachers are nation builders. Think about the profound implications of that in lots of different levels. In these other countries, they won't let you teach if you're not in the top third of the class. Can't do it. Finland, you got to be in the top 10% of the class, and then you're competing for the opportunity to teach. So how do we recruit a higher caliber? How do we provide much better support? The report talks, frankly, about the very uneven quality of teacher preparation programs. But I think, as a country, I've said this repeatedly, I think teachers are the unsung heroes. And we can't do enough to celebrate, to recognize, and learn from great teachers. Pick a number. I think great principals should be paid, $150,000, $200,000 a year. Great teachers, $100, $125, $150. We can't do enough to recognize and reward it. We have beaten down the teaching profession. We have to find ways together to elevate it, to do a much better job of supporting teachers once they enter the profession, to raise the bar for entry, to fix the pipeline. So none of these things are easy. But other countries have done this on a systemic, sustained way year after year. One thing we're going to do, and we are doing now, we're starting to lead this national campaign to recruit the next generation of teachers. With a baby booming generation moving out, we're going to need 1 million new teachers. And we're working very hard to bring in great talent. But challenge ourselves in every way along the pipeline, from the training programs to much better mentoring support, induction, to better career ladders, to giving them the autonomy they need to be successful in the classroom. There's so much that we have to do, and we have to address this and address it for the next 10 years. We can't do it for the next 6 months and walk away. This has to be a national, sustained effort, and we want to work very hard to lead that.
Okay, we've got a question from Olin College, Nita Mass there. You can watch them on the screen. Go ahead.
So hi, I'm a senior here at Olin College. My name is Ali Haas. And we mentioned the sort of unrivaled environment for innovation that the U.S. still enjoys. We also mentioned sort of the confidence that U.S. students have in their skills, in their educational skills. And I was wondering this is a question to Secretary Duncan. I was wondering what you think our education system is currently doing right to foster that kind of environment, and how we can continue to do so in the future.
So we're doing much that's right, just not enough. So you hit on it. Our ability to produce students who are innovative, who are creative, is unmatched. Folks travel from around the world to visit our schools to figure out how we're doing that. Our higher education system, I think, is absolutely the best in the world. No one compares yet. And so there's much that's positive. It's so interesting to me, this imbalance, this dissonance between confidence and reality. And I think while I'm all for confidence, I think as a country we need a little bit of humbleness now. And this is a time to really be humble, to learn a lot from what other folks are doing, and maybe close the achievement confidence gap. And there's so much that we can learn. Again, this report, and I urge people, this report, they talked about at sort of every level of education, how we need to think differently and challenging a lot of our basic assumptions from early childhood education all the way up to teacher preparation programs. We need to take a very, very thoughtful and humble look at that and figure out how we do a better job of preparing many more young people. And so this is a wake-up call. This is a call to arms, and we need to work together.
Okay, we've also got a question online. Mills?
Yes, we have a question from Douglas Kretz at EdReformer. Doug asks, one of the frustrations for students in American high schools is that their work is for such an exclusive audience. For reasons of control and assessment, homework is many students to one teacher. How do we change policy to make education global?
You want to start?
First of all, and a little bit about the question of how do you make sure that more Americans are on the top. Worry about the ones in the bottom. Worry about making the system more equitable and level the playing field. Then smart will take over naturally. You have to assume Americans are just as smart as anybody else, but they have to be given the proper opportunity. Now, the question is about global education. Education is becoming more and more globalized, but the idea is not to standardize it. In fact, the tests that produce the PISA results in Mexico don't speak or ask about Lake Erie. They ask about Lake Chapala, because that's the Mexican lake. So these are done country by country in all the 74 countries that participate here, because they're not about facts. We have plenty of tools, computers, and online gadgets in order to solve all the factual questions that we may have. The question is, how do you use the information, and how do you prepare to then face the world, face the markets, face your careers, face life in general? And that is indeed a global concern. And this is what the PISA results can help us improve.
Secretary Duncan?
Just quickly, I think, again, in this globally competitive, linked, flattened world, giving our students exposure to the broader world is hugely important. And not every child can travel to another country and travel abroad, which is fantastic, but doing a much better job of teaching foreign languages, I think, is hugely important. And I think just the use of technology. Just one quick example, my daughter's in 3rd grade. Her class via Skype is corresponding on an ongoing basis with a classroom in Mali. And the conversations my daughter's having at home with us are entirely different because of that experience. And so using technology to shrink the world, to provide exposure, to give students a sense of what's out there beyond their community, beyond their county or their state or our country, we have this brand new opportunity that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago, and we have to maximize that opportunity for every single child.
Okay, we've got another question here from the Science Engineering Magnet High School in Dallas. Dallas, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Julia Hosu from the Science and Engineering Magnet. I'm a senior here, and I have a question about the PISA test, so either for Mr. Gurria or Secretary Duncan. It seems that here in the U.S., our schooling system goes from slightly less structured in grade school to slightly more structured in high school. So why age 15 to do the testing, since that seems like a very transitional period in time? So, we're kind of deciding between what we learn in elementary school, what we're learning in high school, and it seems a little confusing to be testing at that age.
Typically, it's the age at which schooling is universal. And it is a time in which you've gone through the basic years. Some countries make it actually legally mandatory to stay to 16. In Europe, some of them are extending to go to 18. But cutting at 15 not only has proven practical in terms of having a test that is comparable, it also has proven meaningful in terms of the results. It speaks to us quite clearly about the performance that these children at 15 are going to have when they go to university, and also about the performance that they will have when they go out in the markets. We've tracked a few thousands of them. Remember, this is 500,000. We took, I think, about 30,000 in the case of Canada and tracked them to see how they were doing. And the predictability, given the results of PISA, was very, very high. So we've dealt with over the 10 years and tried to refine it and improve it so that we can say not only how they're doing today, but also how they're going to be doing in the future.
Okay. Do you have anything on that?
No, again, I just think it's so important that we focus on the big picture. So we can debate whether we should test 13 or 14, 50-year-olds. We can debate whether Shanghai's results are statistically valid or not. Or we can say America needs to do a lot better. And it's our goal to be 25th. Do we wake up every morning saying we want to be just like Estonia, or do we want to raise the bar? And I think it's so important that we focus on the big picture, we raise the bar and challenge ourselves. Let the psychometricians have those debates. Let us that want to make a difference in students' lives really come together to do some things very differently and do it with a huge sense of urgency.
Okay. All right. Again, a round of applause here for you guys. Thank you again to Secretary Duncan, Ambassador Kornbluh, and Secretary General Gurria, and thank you in the audience for some very good questions from the internet as well as here in the room. Secretary Duncan is going to stay with us now. We're kind of doing a little bit of set changing to have a broader discussion about how high schools and colleges in this country are faring, and my NewsHour colleague Gwen Eiffel is going to be running that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hari. Thank you, everybody in the room. There were some hands that were still left after that last section, and we're going to try to get to you, but first I get to have a little chat with Secretary Duncan of my own and answer my own question. Welcome again. Thank you. We are going to take some questions online, some questions from obviously the kids out and some adults out in Texas, and we're also going to talk some more about this. But I want to pick up on a point, Secretary Duncan, that you made that caught my ear, because I've spent a lot of this year listening to politicians on their way to Washington trumpeting the values of American exceptionalism. Yet you use terms like, you use terms like mantle of mediocrity, that the world was passing us by. You are very blunt in describing our deficiencies. How does that square with Americans' desire to think of themselves as exceptional?
I think it's my job to tell the truth. And whether you look at these recent PISA results, which we are mediocre at best, whether you look at a 25% dropout rate in this country, whether you look at in one generation that we've fallen from 1st to 9th in the world in college graduates, by any measure, we're not doing what we need to be doing to keep America great. And I'm just absolutely convinced we have to educate our way to a better economy. That's the only way we're going to get there. This is the best long-term investment we can make. And so I think it's my job to be the truth teller. And the only way we get better is to look in the mirror, assess our strengths and weaknesses, and figure out where we need to go. But if we run around saying we're number one, and we're not, that doesn't help us get where we need to go.
Reality check. We're sitting here at 6th and Constitution, a few blocks away from the Capitol, a few blocks the other way away from the White House, where there is a raging debate going on over our head about budgets and spending and deficit reduction and all the things that you talk about, including kind of the airy-fairy theoretical things, cost a lot of money. Do we have the will in this country to even begin to tackle some of the things you've identified in this report?
Well, I think we are gaining the will. We are gaining, for all our challenges, I'm actually very hopeful. I'm very optimistic.
Tell me about that.
Okay, yeah. Well, again, the change we've seen in this country over the past 18, 19, 20 months, we've seen more change in that period than the previous decade combined. So to see 40 states raise standards is extraordinary. To see 44 states working together to come up with the next generation of assessments is extraordinary. To see about 36 states remove barriers to innovation and creativity is extraordinary. So this courage, this leadership isn't coming from me. It's not coming from anyone in Washington. It's coming at the local level. Governors, state school chief officers saying, you know what, Gwen, we're tired of lying to our children. We're tired of lying to our parents. We're not going to do it anymore. We're going to do the right thing and raise the bar. And so we're seeing huge progress. And I'm absolutely convinced we can again lead the world. The President's drawn a line in the sand. He said by 2020 we have to again lead the world in college graduates. And everything we're doing is towards that goal. So the challenges are real. The challenges are urgent. But I have every confidence. America is the most creative, the most thoughtful, the most innovative country in the world. If we respond with urgency, we will again gain our international preeminent spot as a leader of the world in all of these indicators. We can get there.
You sound like you're depending on states and local governments and local school systems to step up to the bar in a way that maybe Washington won't.
I think we all need to work together. But the leadership has to, we need to provide support and incentives, but there's a lot of local control in education in our country, and that can be a real strength. And so this has to be a partnership at the federal, at the state, the local level, but it's our job to support the leadership and the innovation where the rubber meets the road, which is in 95,000 schools. This isn't going to happen just from Washington.
Let me just ask you one more time. How much time in trying to do what you're going to do is spent on Capitol Hill, and how much is spent outside of Washington?
I think we can't do enough here in Washington to engage in this debate. To be very specific, I think we need to invest more, but we need to invest very differently, and we need to invest in the children who need the most help. So if we're investing in the status quo, we'll perpetuate mediocrity. If we invest in a very different vision of education in this country, we have a chance to transform educational quality.
Okay, let's move on to a different question, this college completion rate issue that you raised. By 2018, I know you know this, America is going to need 22 million educated workers. It's on the trajectory to be 3 million workers short of that number. Yes. How do you begin to close that gap? And explain a little bit more fully also for the people in the room and the people online and people watching exactly how we got to this point where so many people are going to college and so few are leaving college with a degree.
Well, let me take it even back a step further from that. So if the goal is to dramatically improve college completion rates, not college going rates by itself, but college completion, it's not just a college problem. I'll get there. You have to, again, in all these things, look at the whole continuum. So we need a big focus on early childhood education. There's lots of data in the OECD study that our early childhood education system is pretty good in this country. Not enough students have opportunity, and very discouragingly, they lose their advantage because they go to poor schools after that. So let's focus on our babies. Secondly, we've had this massive effort on K-12 reform, raising standards, great teachers, great principals, turning around chronically failing schools, raising the bar, huge amount of progress. Let's continue that. Finally, we have to build a culture around college completion at higher education, both at 4-year and 2-year institutions. To tell you exactly what we're doing, we're going to every single state. We're looking at every single 4-year and 2-year school in those states. We're telling them what their graduation rates are now, and to hit the president's goal, how much each of those universities has to contribute in terms of improving outcomes, improving graduation rates. So every school, every state will have a clear trajectory of where they need to go, and we're going to monitor their progress, see which states are doing a great job and which aren't. But this one is a very practical. We know, we can tell every single institution of higher education what they need to do to contribute. I just want to say that they can't do it alone. We have to fix the pipeline. So a huge amount of work has to be to increase the quality of student going into higher education. Far too many of our children today, our students, need remedial education. We've been lying to them. They're not really ready for college. That's not higher education's fault. That's our fault, K-12.
So the stagnation is because we have not prepared these students about what awaits them in college, this confidence or this just being admitted to college, which is where our focus has been the wrong one?
When we've just as a country, we have been complacent. We have been complacent. And other countries have out-educated us. They've out-invested in us. They've made this a priority. And a big part of what I'm trying to do, frankly, is raise the profile of education and get America to wake up. And I think you're seeing lots of signs that America is starting to wake up. It's not so much as interesting. College graduation rates, we've gone from 1st to 9th. It's not that we dropped. We're exactly where we were 9 years ago. A generation ago. We're just flatlined. We haven't moved. Other countries have passed us by. They're outworking us. They're outcompeting us. We got to wake up and we got to start moving.
I do want to get back to that because it seems that the stagnation is the issue here. It's not that we're falling behind. It's that everybody else is moving up.
Faster. That's exactly right. That's true in college graduation rates. It's true in all the OECD stuff. We stagnated.
It's tempting to spend all of your time looking backward and trying to figure out why that happened as opposed to looking forward and figuring out how you fix it. But it seems to me both of those are the great unanswerables.
So lots of folks can write their PhDs and books about why it happened. That's not my interest. My interest is what do we do starting today as fast as we can to get to the next level. And I think we have a really clear game plan of K-12 reform, much better college graduation rates, invest in early childhood education. We have a cradle-to-career strategy to dramatically change those numbers.
I was also struck that in the PISA results, it's clear that people who are disadvantaged in this country are less likely to get help than people who are disadvantaged anywhere else in the world. Now, there are some people who say that part of the stagnation in U.S. test numbers has to do with, they call it the diversity excuse, that there's a preponderance, especially in a public school system, of immigrants or people of color who are not performing. Yeah. What's your response to that?
Well, it's fascinating, Gwen. That's probably one of the biggest fights I fight every day is I have a set of folks who want to tell me that poverty is destiny. And what you see around the world is that poverty is not destiny. In other countries, much more systemically, student after student, school after school, year after year, educate poor and disadvantaged young people. And so anyone who says that you can't overcome these battles is a huge part of the problem. Now, having said that, we need to invest much more. These students need more help. They need wraparound services. They need the best teachers. There's so much that we're doing wrong today. Studies show we're one of 3 countries that doesn't invest more in disadvantaged communities. So folks who say you can't do it are wrong. Folks that say keep doing the same thing is wrong. We need to invest in very different ways, get the students the support they need, get them the best principals, get them the great teachers, and I promise you those students will do extraordinarily well. I've seen it all my life.
Wraparound services, what do you mean?
What I said earlier. So we need to lengthen the school day. We need to lengthen the school year. Our calendar is based upon the agrarian economy. Children in India and China are going to school 25, 30, 35 more days a year. They're just working harder than us. So we need more time, particularly for disadvantaged children who aren't getting those supports at home. If children are hungry, they need to be fed. It's hard to learn if your stomach's growling. We need to take that on. If students can't see the blackboard, need eyeglasses, we need to do that. If students need a social worker or counselor to work through the challenges they're facing at home in the community, we need to do that. And so my vision is that schools need to be community centers. Schools need to be open 12, 13, 14 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year, with a whole host of activities, particularly in disadvantaged communities. And when schools truly become the centers of the community, where you have extraordinary teachers, the best principals, great nonprofit partners coming in during the non-school hours to support and do enrichment activities, social services, then those students will beat the odds, will beat poverty, will beat violence in the community, will beat sometimes dysfunctional families, and be productive citizens long term. They will go to college.
You know, that sounds great, Mr. Secretary. It really, really does. You've been in this job now for 2 years. Are you confident that the people who control the purse strings, whether on the federal level, the state level, the city level, the county level, are you convinced that they share your vision?
My confidence is growing. And are we there yet as a country? Absolutely not. But again, Gwen, let's look at the proof. Over the past 2 years, you've seen transformational change, more change than you've seen the past decade, 20 years combined. And so is this going the right way? Yes. Does everybody share the same sense of urgency and how critical this is for our nation long term? We're not quite there yet. I will say that the confidence level of students versus reality, it's interesting. You see that with parents. If you survey parents today, parents are generally in our country very satisfied with their own school, but very dissatisfied with the rest of schools in the country.
They feel that way about their members of Congress, too, by the way.
So there's this real dissonance that we have to get through, that not enough parents understand that their own school isn't good enough, and they need to do more, and the community needs to do more, and everyone needs to do more. So yes, do we have to continue to educate? And that's why these kinds of forums, these kinds of conversations, I think, are so important. We need to raise awareness. But the last thing I'll say, that the fascinating story that the President always talks about, whenever he meets with international leaders, he brings up education, because that's his great passion. He met with the President of South Korea. South Korea is one of the absolute high-performing countries. President Obama asked the President of South Korea, what's your biggest challenge? And he said right away, my biggest challenge is my parents are too demanding. My parents, even my poorest parents, demand a world-class education. And I have to import thousands of teachers every single year to teach English in my poorest communities because my parents demand it. Gwen, I wish parents were knocking down my door. I wish parents were knocking down the doors of their local schools, of their local districts, saying, together, we need to do something better. We're not there yet, and so we need to continue to educate the American public of how we all have to invest and do business very differently.
And yet, in all my years covering education issues, I've heard more discussion recently about what one does to fix our school systems than I've heard before.
That's a good thing.
I don't know if it's progress, but it's discussion.
It's progress.
But discussion always centers often around reform, which is one of those words which everybody can define it any way they want to. But reform in many places comes down to teacher testing and changing the focus on teachers and what they bring to a classroom rather on what students are bringing to classrooms.
Yeah. So anyone who comes to you with any one simplistic answer, I think is part of the problem. So do we need great teachers? Absolutely. Do we need to invest more in teachers? Absolutely. Do we need to recognize great teachers? Absolutely. We have to do all those things. But we have to challenge parents. We have to challenge board members. We have to challenge superintendents. We have to challenge students themselves. All of us have to move outside our comfort zones. All of us have to do some things very differently. And anyone who says there's one magic bullet oversimplifies it. A great teacher is hugely, hugely important. How we get great teachers, great principals into underserved communities, again, we're so far from where we need to go. So a big part of the solution. But if that's the only thing we're doing, we got to be much more holistic in it.
You sit here in Washington, D.C., where this debate has played out, and so much of the resistance to whatever change or reform or whatever the word is has come from teachers themselves who feel a little bit threatened by these great plans which don't seem to take them into account.
I disagree. So I think teachers are actually helping to lead this change. I have a set of teacher ambassadors, great teachers from around the country who work with me, who are just extraordinarily smart, committed, passionate. If you look at Race to the Top and the change that's driven, you have not just states, you have hundreds of not just teachers, but local teacher unions who signed on to bold, comprehensive, thoughtful plans. And change is hard. I do think teachers have been beaten down. I think teachers have been demonized, and that's we have to change that. But great teachers want the best for their children. They want the best for the community. And I think, frankly, we have to do a much better job of listening to those great teachers and helping them be part of the solution.
Let's talk about consequences. Assume for a moment that you don't possess a magic wand and can't turn this around in your time in office. What are the consequences that other countries outcompete us or out-educate us? What happens as a result of that? Why should we care that that happens?
Well, again, if you look at the McKinsey report and they look at the dropout rate and achievement gap, and what they say, and there are lots of numbers behind this, is the effect of that is the effect of a national permanent recession. And what we will see is jobs continue to flow overseas. We'll see international companies set up their plants, set up their centers in other places. We have an unemployment rate that is staggeringly high today. The jobs of the future, as you know so well, are knowledge-based. You need college-educated folks to do this work. And so the consequences for our country are absolutely devastating if we don't start to behave in very different ways.
You mentioned the term, I'm always trying to sort out what people actually mean by terms, which sound like jargon to people who aren't in the education business, but accelerating learning. What does that mean, accelerating learning?
Well, let me tell you the problem first. The problem that OECD points out, and this is a devastating one, is the longer our children are in school, the worse they do. The longer they're in school, the worse they do.
On a school day?
No, every year.
Every year.
Year after year after year, our children in America are falling further behind. Our 3- and 4-year-olds enter kindergarten okay, and they fall further and further behind. So each year, children in other countries are learning more than children in this country. And so the gap between American student performance in Singapore and Finland and South Korea and Canada and these other countries, the gap widens year after year after year. We have to reverse that. The only way you reverse that is if students are learning more each year. That's the definition of the problem.
I want to get to questions from the audience, but I have one final question that I want to pose to you, which is something that Secretary Gurria brought up, which is this idea of comparing all 50 states in these PISA results. When Massachusetts, for instance, I guess some study that found out that Massachusetts actually does really well among the states. Is there any... I saw you kind of nodding when he said that. Is that something that you could embrace?
Oh, absolutely. This is hugely important. And again, this is where this idea of common standards is so important. We had in our country, we had 50 different standards, 50 different goalposts, and they all got dummied down due to political pressure. Now, for the first time in our country, children in Massachusetts and children in Mississippi are going to be measured by the same yardstick. And as you know, children in Massachusetts and Mississippi and any other state aren't competing for jobs in the district, in the state. They're competing nationally, but today internationally. And so looking at how every single state is doing is hugely important. Common standards help to get us there. Looking at PISA results state by state is another way to shine a spotlight. And when we have 50 states, we need to know who are the 5 states that are both raising the bar and closing achievement gaps. And we have some states doing extraordinary things. What states are in the middle? What states are students falling further and further behind each year? We need to have those honest conversations. 30 years ago, it was okay to drop out of school. It was really okay. There was an acceptable dropout rate. You could go get a good job and own your own home and support your family. That's gone, Gwen. Those days are over. We have to behave in very different ways, and having that focus on what's working and what's not at the country level, at the state level, ultimately district level, Ambassador Kornbluh talked about at the school level, having that clarity and that transparency is going to help drive the country where we need to go.
Assuming that I don't possess all the good questions in the room, I will now... Well, let's go behind us just to make it as difficult as possible for us and take a question over here. Microphone is making its way.
Hi, thanks. Is that on? Okay. Thanks, Secretary Duncan, for being the bully pulpit on this. As a teacher, I really appreciate that. My name is Mike Town. I teach AP Environmental Science and Sustainability in Redmond, Washington. This year, I'm an Einstein Fellow at the National Science Foundation. I have a specific question on administration, building level administration. In my 25 years as a science teacher, I've found that one of the greatest variables to make my colleagues and I perform greater than average is to have a culture in our schools set by our building administration that is academically enriched. I've heard a lot of good things about teachers in the debate over the last couple of years and reform with teachers, but how specifically do we get administrators in our buildings that value the academic culture in order to raise up the teaching level?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Your temptation is to talk to him, but for the purpose of the broadcast, why don't you just talk to me?
Sorry, Mike. Turn you back on the question. So, Mike, you're right here. I've talked a lot about how folks have to move and change behavior, Gwen. I've talked very publicly that our Department of Education has been part of the problem. And as much as we're pushing other folks to move, we have to push ourselves. One of the big areas where I think our department has been a part of the problem is we haven't invested in principal leadership. And there are no good schools in this country without a good principal. Don't exist. I've been to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools. No good schools without a good principal. And what's very interesting is a great principal can build a school for 8, 10, 12 years. And with the wrong succession planning, wrong leader comes in, that school can be a disaster in 8 months. It's so much harder to build something than it is to tear it down. So one thing we're doing in tough budget times, I'm asking for a 5-fold, a quintupling of investment in principal leadership. It's by far the biggest increase that we're asking for. And if we could get 95,000 great principals in our 95,000 schools, then I could retire and go to the Bahamas. My job would be done. And so principal leadership, we can't overstate how important it is. Great principals attract great talent. They nurture that great talent. They support that great talent. They hold them accountable, but give them the room to move and to be creative and to work together. Bad principals scare off good teachers. They're threatened by them. They micromanage them. They don't recruit good talent. And so principal leadership is hugely important. We've been part of the problem there, and we're trying very hard to change our behavior.
I wonder if we have a question from the Olich College of Engineering out in Needham, Massachusetts. There you are. Hi. Anybody from Olin have a question for the Secretary? Take a pick. Any of you.
Something that we were talking about earlier was that there's a big push to raise the bar in education, but we don't necessarily know where creativity fits into that, because at Olin, at least, we see creativity as one of our biggest assets, and we were wondering how you were planning on ensuring that creativity was included in the K-12 education system, and how raising the bar wouldn't just eliminate variability and autonomy in individual student learning.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it can't just be K-12. It's got to be, what do you do in preschool, what are you doing at higher ed? But I think this idea of creativity, innovation, entrepreneurs, that's the future. That's where the job market's going. We need folks that just don't know science and technology. We need folks who are going to create the jobs and create the businesses that don't exist today. And so this idea, the biggest complaint I've heard as I've traveled the country is this idea of a narrowing of the curriculum that we're seeing under No Child Left Behind. So reading and math get tested, they get taught, but science, social studies, foreign language, dance, drama, art, music, creativity, think about dance, think about drama, think about the tie to math. And unfortunately, in many places, those have been eliminated. And so again, we're trying to come back. I think the way you infuse creativity is you teach in different ways, you think about entrepreneurship, but you give children a well-rounded, world-class education. And let me be clear, that's not just at the high school level, that's got to be for our first and second and third graders, so they start to get a sense of the world around them and what their skills and what their interests are. And so where we have narrowed the curriculum around the country, I think we've lost a lot of that creativity. We've lost a lot of the innovation. And we're fighting very hard and asking for $1 billion to try and go back in a very different direction.
That doesn't sound like a lot of money, actually, for what you're talking about.
Give me 10.
All right. I have it right here. Yes, sir.
My name is Andy Zavara. I've been in education for 46 years, both in the public and private. I ran 2 private schools in the area. I'm now a consultant. I think there's an elephant in the room that needs to be addressed, and not overstating and making this simplistic. But there's an organization that is responsible for what we call teacher training, called the universities and colleges. I would ask you, would you like your doctor trained the way these universities and colleges train our teachers?
No, and and I've been very public, and you can look at my speeches on this, and I've talked to the schools of education. I'm actually a big fan of the medical model, and I'm a big fan of residency programs, and we're putting $200 million behind places that are training great teachers, great incoming teachers to work with master teachers. And I think there's so much we can learn from the medical profession. And if you look at surveys of great young teachers, and I've talked anecdotally to hundreds and hundreds of them, again, let's talk facts. Let's talk, if we're going to get better, let's talk truth. The truth is, and there are lots of surveys, the vast majority, 60, 70% of great young teachers don't feel they've been adequately prepared by the schools of education. So I've challenged schools of education very hard and very publicly that they have to change their behavior. Some extraordinary ones, some in the middle, some at the bottom. 2 biggest complaints I hear from good young teachers is, one, not enough help in classroom management. So lots of theory of education, lots of philosophy of education, lots of history of education, not enough actual children. And having those hands-on practical experiences freshman, sophomore, junior year are hugely important. Secondly, there's been this huge influx of new data and formative assessments over the past 5, 10 years. And great young teachers are using these formative assessments not to figure out what am I teaching, but what are my students learning, and how to differentiate instruction, how to do small group instruction. And what they're all saying to me is, these are great young teachers. They're saying, this took me to a different level, but why did I have to learn it in the job? Why didn't I learn that as an undergrad? And the reason why is too many schools of education professors have been out of the schools for 15, 20 years, and all this new technology has come online before they got there. So there are others, but those are 2 overriding biggest complaints that I hear from great young educators.
Do we have another question behind me?
I'm Michelle Cahill from Carnegie Corporation of New York of Philanthropy. And you've talked quite a bit, Secretary Duncan, about acceleration. And the U.S. has, we see from the PISA data, a large number of young people who are low performers. But many times in our culture, in the education conversations, people think about remediation for our teenagers who are way behind, and particularly in the turnaround schools. And I wonder if you would speak to how we should be thinking about acceleration, and particularly in thinking about turning around lowest performing schools.
So I think whether it's the International Baccalaureate curriculum or AP classes, advanced placement, or dual enrollment with 2-year, 4-year colleges, I think every child in this country should have access to those kinds of opportunities in high school. And it's amazing to me that you see some high schools that literally offer 40 AP classes and some of almost none. And I'll give you one example. When I met with a group of students earlier in Detroit at Cody High School, great students, committed, tough community, beating the odds, want to do well, want to go to college. Halfway through the conversation, I asked the question, they have no AP classes at Cody High School, none. So how in 2010, with some schools that have 40 AP classes, and these young people don't have access to any, how are they going to have a chance to compete against their peers in a global economy as they take the next step? And so dual enrollment, again, AP, International Baccalaureate. If students are struggling, sure, let's give them the help. But this is about raising the bar. This is about raising the bar and expecting much more. And I'll tell you, I think if we want to reduce the dropout rate, many students drop out because they're bored. They're not challenged. Let's make school interesting. Let's think about graduating more students in 3 years. There's so many different creative things that we can do that I think will help us get where we need to go. But as you heard from the Secretary General, dumbing things down has been part of our problem. And we have to dramatically raise the bar. And I promise you, if we as adults raise the bar, our students will more than meet us halfway.
Let's go to where they make school interesting, in Dallas, Texas, at the Science and Engineering Magnet High School, for another question.
Hi, I'm Joshua Newton, and I teach AP Calculus. You've talked a lot about how our students are well prepared and on average with other students around the world when they enter kindergarten. Do you have any plans to get high-level, highly qualified content specialists to teach in the elementary level to keep those students up to date?
It's a great question. Thanks for your leadership. So I think a big part of my job is cloning you and others. And we have this tremendous lack of math and science teachers around the country, Gwen. There's another one. We've had this for a couple decades. So I'm a little radical. I think we should pay math and science teachers a lot more money. And 10 grand, 15 grand, 20 grand, folks are using our Race to Top resources to do this. We're either going to keep talking about a math and science teacher shortage for the next 25, 30 years, or we're going to do something about it. And to his question, it can't just be at the high school level. Students start to turn out in 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th grade. They start to tune out because they're being taught by teachers who don't know the content. And it's hard to instill in children a passion for something that you don't really know. So you have many schools that are starting to departmentalize earlier, 4th and 5th and 6th grade. My daughter's in 3rd grade. They're breaking up math and science with different teachers and figuring out which teachers are best at what. It doesn't cost a nickel. Just figuring out, who can do what. And giving students access to high-quality teachers who know math and know science in those formative years is a huge part of the problem today. Not enough access, particularly in disadvantaged communities, and that has to fundamentally change.
Is your daughter in public school?
She is.
Just checking.
Always has been. We're proud parents.
Do you have a question from online?
We do, from Connie Harriman in Greenville, South Carolina. Connie asks, what role should both large and small business take to align themselves with educational system to promote and develop creative thinking as an important value and competency?
So there's so much, again, as we challenge everyone, that I'm challenging the business community to do. First, we want businesses to build real relationships with those local colleges and universities. Are we preparing the workers? They're the ultimate sort of, we need to supply the workers and the creativity and the entrepreneurial spirit that they need. Are they building relationships with those institutions, being very clear about our graduates meeting their needs or not? Secondly, we're challenging businesses to create internships and to really bring students in and give them exposure, give them experience, let them work there for a summer, let them work there after school. There are so many children, Gwen, who are beating horrendous odds, 95% attendance, B+ averages. Who's looking out for them? Who's giving them an opportunity? Businesses can do that. School boards have to become much more professional, and getting business leaders to step up and be part of governance structures can be hugely important. Finally, having businesses just partner with a local school, tutors, mentors, role models, coaches, come in and help after school. So as the country moves, the business community has both, I think, a great self-interest and also a really important altruistic interest in seeing our schools do better. And we have extraordinary business partnerships. Intel, we heard from today, is doing amazing things. We need more, not just big businesses, but medium-sized and small businesses to have an impact, both within their corporations, but also on the individual employees. What are they all doing to be part of the solution?
We have time for another question from the audience, and I think it's going to be you. Your hand's been up for a while.
Hello, I'm Dita Caperton, the president of the worldwideworkshop.org. We are talking about education for innovation, yet not in this nation or in any of the countries in the PISA report do we see that people educate or teach innovation, although we know that you can teach it, and especially innovation with digital media. So I wonder if we can institute a policy or even a requirement that every school, preschool, kindergarten, K-12, all the way to higher education in this nation will actually be required to teach innovation with computational tools and digital media, and also teach 3 languages, English, maybe Spanish or Chinese, and a computer language, which is the language of engineering, modeling, visualization, and innovation in this knowledge-based economy.
So there are lots of things that maybe in a different world you could legislate or mandate from here. This is one of those areas where, frankly, I think you can't do that. I think the opportunity we have, the unique opportunity we have, is to shine a spotlight on those places that are doing this extraordinarily well. And there are amazing schools that every single day are teaching creativity, they're teaching entrepreneurship, where children are learning 2 and 3 languages. That's the exception rather than the norm. But I think what we can do, Gwen, is where we're getting great results, we need to do a much better job of telling that story and using the Billy pulpit to say, let's replicate that. But can we just mandate teaching 3 languages tomorrow? Unfortunately, I don't think we can.
I know we said that was the last question, but I have time for one more quick one. If something's really good about it. Sir.
I'm Michael Lubell. I'm Director of Public Affairs of the American Physical Society. I'm also Professor of Physics at CCNY. I want to return to the issue of science and math teacher preparation. When I was chairman of my department, we struck a deal with our education school to bring in somebody who would work both in our department and the education school, because science and math are discipline-based. And I'm wondering what you, as Secretary of Education, can do to encourage universities to adopt models like that.
Yeah. And again, thanks for your leadership. And it's such common sense, but in so many places, you so well know, schools of education are like islands. They're separate from the rest, and you need an entire institution to rally behind this. So not surprisingly, in places that are doing a great job in math and science education, it's not the School of Education working by itself. It's physical sciences, it's everybody else stepping in. One thing we asked for and didn't get in terms of funding is we wanted to do a race to the top for schools of education. And that funding we didn't get as part of the Higher Education Act. But there's a huge need there, and we're thinking through now some creative ways to put incentives in place to get schools of education to behave very differently and to partner. And it's not just them. Often the universities aren't sort of providing the support, so it's a two-way street. But that's exactly where we need to go, in the places that are producing the best in the largest quantity of math and science teachers. It is never the School of Education working in isolation, and we need to do a better job of providing incentives, again, and really expanding that best practice.
Thank you, Secretary Duncan. You've been very generous with your time and with your candor. That concludes the first half of our program. For those of you here at the Newseum, we'll take a 15-minute break. If you're joining us online, we'll continue with conversations with Secretary Duncan, Wendy Hawkins of Intel, and Secretary General Gurria. After the studio break, Robert Atkinson of ITIF will reveal results from his group's latest study on refueling the U.S. innovation economy and their suggestions for improving STEM education. We'll talk in depth with our guests from Olin College in Needham, Massachusetts, and the School of Science and Engineering Magnet in Dallas. And Walter Isaacson, president of the Aspen Institute, will interview author and New York Times columnist Tom Friedman. And now to Hari and Secretary Duncan.
Thanks, Gwen. Now for our web audience, we're going to continue our conversation with Secretary of Education Arne Duncan. So thanks for kind of indulging the web audience. They're part of this town hall too. They've had front row seats the whole time, and they've been on Twitter. They've been pretty active. So let me get a couple questions in. Brienne from Columbia, Maryland. How and when will schools start to make the connection between education and a job? How will they develop free-thinking, problem-solving students?
So I think it's so important, not just in high school, but even earlier in elementary, middle school, for students to have career days, to have people come in and have students do job shadowing. Students need to know, why is algebra important? Why do I need to learn biology? And making those real-world connections, I think, happens two ways. One is by bringing adults who are in those professions into the schools, and secondly, by taking students out of schools into businesses, into places where that kind of learning is so integral. I think that exposure, a light bulb starts to go on for young people to say, hey, this is why this is important. I need to work a little harder.
Okay. Another one was a social studies teacher in Texas says, it's been proven to see true results in a classroom. You need to have an effective teacher. What's your strategy for keeping effective teachers in the classroom who would otherwise pursue higher roles such as in administration?
So I've said repeatedly today, I think great teachers are the unsung heroes in our country. And we need to compensate them in a much different way. We need to provide much more support as they're growing throughout their career. We need to make sure that great teachers can stay in the classroom and be rewarded, not have to leave and go to administration to make more money. We have this huge opportunity with a baby boomer generation retiring to bring in this next generation of talent. We've launched a new website, teach.gov, that I encourage people to look at. And we want to bring in extraordinary talent, have that talent be much more diverse than it is today. And we can't do enough to recognize, to reward, and to incentivize great teachers.
Okay, Mike from Yakima asks, there are so many education films right now that are actually piercing through to Hollywood, whether it's Waiting for Superman or The Lottery or Race to Nowhere. Is that something that the Department of Education screens? Do you guys see this? Is this message getting home?
Absolutely. And I think what we're trying to do is raise the profile of education in the country and, again, create this call to action. We have to, as a country, wake up. And whether it's me using the bully pulpit, whether it's Hollywood with movies, whether it's just parents in local communities stepping up and saying we need to do more, this has to become the national priority. This is a long-term answer. And so those kinds of films are again, I think, they're not never the answer, right, but they help to bring awareness, and that's all good. That's all good.
Dave from Washington, D.C., how are you planning on increasing minority and female participation in STEM programs and careers, and why is this so important for the U.S. economic future?
Yeah. So first, again, I go back to the lack of diversity in our current teacher workforce. Less than 1 in 50 of our teachers today, less than 2% is an African-American male. And if you put together African-American males and Hispanic males, that number is less than 3.5%. So we have this growing divergence between the amazing diversity of our nation's students, of our young people, and the teacher workforce. And so as a big part of this National Teacher Campaign, we have an absolute laser-like focus on increasing diversity. And we need more women to come in. We need more men and more men of color to come in. You go to some elementary schools today, and you see no men. It's all female teachers. And I think about all the young boys growing up today without a dad at home, and how desperately they need mentors and role models. And so we're trying to take this on openly and honestly and forthrightly. There's significant scholarship programs out there to bring minorities and women into education. One thing we passed with Congress' support and the President's great leadership is something called income-based repayment, where after 10 years of teaching or 10 years of public service, all of your debt is forgiven, is erased. And so historically there are many folks of great talent, great passion from the minority community who wanted to teach, but they had $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 in loans and simply couldn't afford to do it, couldn't follow their heart. We've basically removed that financial impediment. It's a huge breakthrough, income-based repayment.
I mean, a good part of this Digital Town Hall was about the statistics from PISA, and we have numbers here in our own country. I can't remember the sort of acronym soup here, but NSSE, maybe the ones that take student engagement? NAEP, right? Yep. So is there a way that we can make that mandatory to publicize that? So automatically when I'm a parent trying to decide on a school, I not just have immediate information on, say, an iPhone app, but I can kind of see trend lines and say, not these schools, this one's improving, this one hasn't been.
Yeah, we can better publicize. A lot of this information is available on the web. I think it really is breaking through to parents to really challenge, how is my school doing relative to other schools? How is my district doing? If I'm in elementary, how does that middle school look? How does that high school look? Am I looking a step ahead? And what am I doing now to make sure that's a great school when my child is ready to go? And so we're trying to create this much greater awareness among parents. I said earlier, it's really interesting. If you survey parents today, the vast majority of parents are satisfied with their own school, but dissatisfied with the nation's schools. And not enough parents understand that their own school needs to get dramatically better in this new, global, knowledge-based economy. And so it is providing information, it's providing data, but I think it's those conversations with parents about the facts that we need to engage on in a much more comprehensive grassroots level.
Okay, final question from online, almost the same way we ended the last time we interviewed. Were you part of the game where President Obama got his busted lip?
I was.
All right, thanks so much.
He can take a hit. He's going strong.
All right, thanks so much for your time, Secretary Duncan.
Thanks for having me.
All right. All right, next up, we're joined by Ms. Hawkins from the Intel Foundation. Thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
All right, so I guess the bigger picture question is, why is Intel sponsoring something like this? Why does sort of, for example, K through 12 education matter for a company like yours?
Well, since the company began over 40 years ago, we've always invested in higher education. We've had a very close partnership with higher education. It's been the driver for innovation inside of our own company. But 20 years ago, we began to look at the need to work in K through 12 education as well in order to ensure that that pipeline was providing to higher education the kinds of students with the kinds of preparedness that would allow them to be successful at a company like Intel.
So you're kind of in an interesting position in the sense that you're seeing grant applications or kind of people competing with what they think are good ideas. What are the kind of consistent themes that you've seen over the years that you've decided to fund and say, we think this is working and we're seeing more and more of this as a trend?
We have an overwhelming investment in teachers. We see that as the highest leverage point where we can invest. You invest in one teacher, strengthen them, and you touch not just that one teacher for 1 year, but you touch every classroom full of students that they teach for the rest of their career. So much of our investment is there. We also are very critically focused on the very talented students who come to the Intel Science Talent Search and Intel International Science and Engineering Fair, the Tech Entrepreneurship Challenge. Because we believe that not enough of these students are recognized in the same way that we recognize athletes and cheerleaders in this country, and they're not supported in the way that is necessary for a much higher percentage of our students to say, that's what I want to do when I grow up.
I think a lot of people are familiar with the "Our Rock Stars Are Not Like Your Rock Stars" advertisement. But what do you try and do from a kind of a mentorship level? How many of your, I guess, engineers or folks at the companies are going out into their school districts and the communities that they're at and trying to just kind of physically be a presence in those classrooms and saying, hey, listen, I actually work in this field. Let me tell you, there's a future here. You should go ahead and finish that math problem.
Sure. Well, one of the programs that we started many years ago, 20 years ago, was to match the time our employees put volunteering in school with dollars. We found that to be one of the greatest incentives to our employees. They were happy to go volunteer if it meant that they could take a little bit of Intel with them, and so we support them with dollars. But a couple of years ago, we decided on our 40th anniversary that rather than celebrate by throwing a party for ourselves, we wanted to celebrate our anniversary by investing yet further in that, and we challenged ourselves to donate 1 million hours of Intel volunteer time, primarily in schools, but in other organizations around the world. And our employees have lived up to that and exceeded that challenge every year since then. So 1 million hours of the kinds of talent that our engineers and employees bring into schools is a huge investment in addition to the $100 million in cash that we invest every year as well.
So what kind of, what's the first thing that leaps out at you from these PISA numbers that you've heard today, and how significant is it?
Well, I've always said that my travels in China, and we work very closely in China, have facilities and manufacturing there. So I've spent some time in China, which is a fascinating, gorgeous, and if you're paying attention as a U.S. citizen, kind of a scary place to us because they're very focused. They're very dedicated to lifting their country up through education, and the results from the PISA exam certainly demonstrate that. The fact that the United States, while not on an absolute scale getting worse and worse, but in a relative scale, we're being passed by other countries on an annual basis. Every time we look at the scores, these countries are continuing to do better. They're continuing to make investments. They're continuing to be more successful in teaching their children, and it ought to be energizing us. It ought to be scaring us. And we hope that more and more people see those data the same way we do, that we've got to do better. This is absolutely critical for our country, for our economy, for our children, for our own lives.
Do you see that kind of a public-private partnership increasing? Do you see more companies kind of trying to do what you're doing and saying, okay, well, let's get on the same page here and let's try to get that same message out to our kids?
Absolutely. Here in the United States, we have the Change the Equation Coalition, which Intel is a leader in. Over 100 companies have signed on. We're working with the White House and with Congress. We work closely with the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers, and in those partnerships, we work closely with other companies. We are involved in a national coalition looking at how to change assessments so that we're actually measuring what's important in education and not just what's easy to measure, and we're working there with, for instance, Cisco and Microsoft. So coalitions, public-private partnerships, both here in the United States and around the world, are critical.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for your time, Ms. Hawkins.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're going to try and switch up a little bit here. We've got a STEM awareness test for those folks that are online, and to help me out here, Mr. Atkins from ITIF. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, so we've got a couple of questions I think that'll be on the screen when the folks are looking out there. Let's see. The first question: a much larger share of college grads in China graduate with STEM degrees than in the United States. What is the principal reason for this? We've got three choices. A, Chinese students are smarter than American students. B, Chinese students are told from an early age that STEM is beneficial to their nation. Or C, that the Chinese government significantly limits non-STEM slots in universities, so if a student wants to go to university, they have a much better chance if they major in STEM. I'm considering the alternatives. We've got, obviously, a very long answer in C, but why is this C?
Well, it's C because the Chinese think that STEM is this critical thing for their country, and they're certainly not as democratic and individualistic as our society is, so there's no sort of social norms that prevent them from saying, no, we're going to ration this. We're going to tell you that you can't go to college unless you do what we think you need to do. Mm-hmm. We would never do that in this country, but we do the exact opposite, which we say we're completely indifferent as to what you do. You want to go to college and major in art history? Fine. You want to go to major in physics? Fine. So we're at the polar opposite of what China does. We have no incentives. We have no encouragement to go into STEM at the college level. They go way too far the other direction, which is why they have so many people doing it. Okay, next question up here. American high school students take the AP history test. How much more or less than the AP computer science AB test? The options, I think we had it on our screen there for a second. A, 50% less. B, approximately the same rate. C, twice as much. Or D, 3 times as much. Well, the answer is 3 times more kids take art history AP test than take the computer science AP test, which, that's a fact. There's no value associated with that. I would ascribe a value to that, that's pretty frightening, that more people, 3 times more kids are taking art history than taking computer science. Okay, and we've got an MIT graduate question, I think, here. Let's see. Is that from the sheet here? We've got it on the next page. Okay. What share of MIT students eventually become entrepreneurs? It's A, 6%, B, 14%, C, 25%, or D, 42%. Given that I wrote that question, I should know the answer, but I believe it is 25%. Yeah, that's astounding. It is astounding, and what's really interesting, Olin College, which is represented here, much younger college, but we modeled Olin's entrepreneurship rate, and we would predict that Olin will actually have a much higher rate of entrepreneurship ultimately than even MIT, which is one of the world leaders in entrepreneurship. So it is possible to structure higher education to get kids to come out and be entrepreneurs and start companies. We just don't do it very much. Well, especially in an environment where you're thinking, okay, science and technology, these are almost kind of data entry level or sort of the base of the pyramid of companies, but really now you're talking about if 25% of MIT students are becoming entrepreneurs, they're starting to think bigger, they've got vision, they have those other kind of skills to lead companies as well. Exactly. Okay, foreign students question. I think we've got one. I think it's up. In 2007, what share of U.S. STEM doctoral degrees were awarded to foreign students? A, 14%, B, 31%, C, 48%, or D, 73%? What do you think? I think 73%. Wow. That's unbeliable. You go to a lot of universities. You know what? I think it might be 48%. Is it 48%? Yeah, that's why it's so unbelievable. Okay, that's why it was unbelievable. Unbelievable how high that number got. I think that was just the new data that came out last week. So I mean, it's actually 73 or close to 70% in certain disciplines. Okay. When you kind of see this it also gets compounded into the conversation of immigration and education and do we have enough engineers or do we have not enough engineers? And when we see these education trends saying that perhaps our
our science and technology education needs to be reformulated. Are there kind of short-term, medium-term, and kind of long-term solutions that industry as a whole looks at?
Yeah, I mean, even if we redesigned STEM education in the country tomorrow and did it right, we're 10 years out from a pipeline emerging of kids who could do something effectively or more effectively than they could do now. So at least in the short run, we're going to have to continue to rely on foreign students who are interested in STEM and get degrees both here and abroad. And that's what we've been doing, although we could do a better job of it. We limit H-1B visas, and I think that is a problem.
Okay, our final question here. Median weekly earnings for U.S. engineers are what share of median weekly earnings for all workers? A, 13% less, B, 9% more, C, 43% more, D, 81% more, or E, 175% more? Wow.
It's 175, and to me that goes to a key point that a lot of people make, and in our view mistakenly say, the reason people aren't going into STEM is it isn't remunerative. They can go into Wall Street. It's pretty remunerative. You know, it's a lot better paying than almost every other occupation, with the exception of finance, doctors, and lawyers. You know, it's a pretty well-paying career, and so I don't think it's a money issue for people. It's much more complicated than that.
Okay, we'll have to leave the quiz results there, I think, right now for a while. But we're going to go back to our live studio audience, who's had a good chance, I hope, to get your Twitter stuff on, get all your emails out of the way, and if you could go ahead and turn your cell phones back off just so it doesn't interrupt our microphones here. And we're going to continue our conversation here, the center stage. All right. So welcome back. For those of you joining us, I'm Hari Srinivasan, correspondent for the PBS NewsHour. Later in our program, Walter Isaacson, president of the Aspen Institute, will interview author and New York Times columnist Tom Friedman. But first, we'll hear details of a new study about how education can refuel innovation-based industries here in the United States. The study was authored by Marilia Mayo and Robert Atkinson, who joins us now. Mr. Atkin is the founder and president of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, a Washington, D.C.-based technology policy organization. He's also author of The Past and Future of America's Economy. Also with us again are teachers, administrators, and students from two schools taking fresh approaches to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education: Olin College in Needham, Massachusetts, and the School of Science and Engineering Magnet School in Dallas, Texas. Welcome to you all. First to Robert Atkinson. Thanks for being with us again. So, you know, when we think about we heard about these numbers this morning, talking about global education. And I was just asking Secretary Duncan this question, too. But there are numbers here inside the United States that are comparing schools, whether it's K through 12 or colleges. Do we have access to those as easily as the PISA numbers?
No, we don't. One of the measures that we have, certainly at the college level, is a thing called the National Survey of Student Engagement. It's a survey of hundreds of colleges, thousands of students, and it's a survey that's been done by, I believe, Indiana University, and it's a very, very top quality survey, and it measures how well students are engaged in college and how well they're likely to do. But, and here's the key, very few universities release this data publicly, even though it's there. Now, Olin, by the way, releases it publicly, but the reason Olin releases it publicly is their scores are so high. Right. They're just, you know, of course they're going to release it. So why wouldn't this data be released publicly? Why wouldn't the federal government say to all colleges and universities, if you want a federal grant from us, or if you want Pell Grants for your students, whatever, you have to upload this data into a database that parents, employers, students could view, and then we'd have a better sense of performance of some of the colleges. There's actually a more recent one on the National Survey of High School Engagement, which is a little bit newer, it needs more work, but it's a very fascinating study, and it shows that upwards of 60% of high school kids are bored on a regular basis. And why don't we know which high schools have the highest boredom rates in the country? And tell us a lot.
So, I mean,
I'm sure it's not the Dallas High School.
Right. So I can see this, turning into some sort of a mobile phone app that you can essentially start to do this with a school compare system. HHS has done really wonderful stuff to try to increase the amount of information that you have, for example, for hospitals. But why not have this for schools? So if I'm shopping for a school for my kids, so to speak, I can maybe see trend lines over time and say, maybe these two schools aren't exactly equal.
Yeah, and then the other thing, too, it's not just about empowering the customers, the students, parents, employers. It's about letting us know, why are Olin scores so high? What are they doing differently than say, University of X engineering school? We don't know. Well, we sort of know a little bit about that. But if we had all that data, we could then get a better sense of what's working and why it's working than what we have today.
Okay. Well, one of the reports that your organization has generated a little while back, it kind of pitches for one of the things that I picked up on was that instead of being in a some STEM for all model, that we should go for an all STEM for some. Explain that.
Well, this is actually a report we're releasing today, and the report essentially argues one of the things
I have my sources.
Well, I guess last night we released it, so that was a while ago. It argues in the very first chapter, and by the way, I want to call out my colleague Marilee Mayo, who really just did a fantastic job on this report and was the lead author on it. We looked at 45 different studies, commissions, reports that have been done all the way back to the post-war period, and they essentially all say the exact same thing, and they just say it over and over again, and we're still saying the exact same thing, and really not much has changed. And the great Einstein once said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The fundamental thing we're saying in this report is what we've been doing isn't working, the frame by which we're thinking about it isn't working, and we need a new approach, which we call some STEM for all. And what we mean by that is what we need in this country is to identify kids really at all socioeconomic classes and groups, identify them early on who are interested in this. Almost, we use an analogy in the report of an NCAA recruiting model. You know, we don't have, every school doesn't have a great football coach in a giant stadium. What we do is we recruit kids, we give them training, we give them coaching, we give them classes to become football players or basketball players. We need the same model in STEM. We need to identify the right kids and then give them great experiences, like the Dallas Magnet School, which is taking kids in the Dallas region and giving them kids who are interested in STEM and giving them a great experience. So one of the things we call for in the report is the creation of 400 new Dallas and math and engineering academies. In other words, 400 more of these kinds of high schools is one of the recommendations we make.
So some parents are automatically going to say, wait, I think you're preaching some child left behind. You know, I mean, what about, aren't all of our children guaranteed, shouldn't they be guaranteed the equal opportunity to find that moment where they are interested in STEM education? If they don't have those kind of classrooms, if they don't have that first chemistry lab experience, maybe they are never going to be interested in it.
Well, a couple of things. One, Secretary Duncan talked about 25% dropout rate. It seems to me when you have a 25% dropout rate, we're doing something pretty seriously wrong. And in our view, one of the things we're doing seriously wrong in the high school level is we're creating high schools that basically have no respect for student interests. So we're going to force you to do something, and we're going to force everybody to do the exact same thing, regardless of what your interests are. And what we're arguing in the report is for much more of a mass customization model. In other words, not every student wants to be a scientist, not every student wants to be an artist, not every student wants to go into journalism or law or anything. Why don't we, instead of forcing more and more requirements at the high school level, so that right now you crowd out almost any electives in most high schools. There's very few choice for kids. So it's not a question of somehow saying that some kids are going to get STEM. Of course there'd be physics and science and all these other classes. By the way, one other interesting thing, about 75% of STEM jobs are not represented in high school curriculum by and large, and that's engineering and IT. So that's 75% of real STEM jobs are in those two disciplines. We don't do engineering in high school, and we do much less computer science. We almost do, it's not really computer science, it's advanced programming for most kids. So we're not even providing the right skills right now in high school for STEM.
And so how do you see kind of an NCAA, almost a first-round draft choice system working, and how much would that cost to try to implement?
Well, actually, one of the things that I think we do in the report is we try to identify a lot of ideas and options that are not going to cost very much money. And so one of the ideas is there are already federal research programs, there are already outreach programs like that around the country, and we think we could ramp those up and expand them. And then the other, so that they would identify kids. The other way we do this is we talk. Marilee Mayo has done a lot of groundbreaking work on video game learning, and there's really amazing results that kids can learn STEM through video games and online learning. You can use that as a way to funnel kids into this. So it's not really a question of costing a lot more, it's a question of being more strategic with what we're doing.
Okay, we're going to start taking questions from our audience here. Wendy Hawkins from the Intel Foundation, we'll start with you.
Well, you've said a number of things that trigger thoughts. Hi, Rob. You've said a number of things that trigger thoughts that I think that we need to dig down into a little bit. One in particular that I'd love to hear your thoughts after all of the research that you've done is around attracting and retaining women, in particular underrepresented minorities, in these fields. I'm concerned that if we identify early that we may miss opportunities with those students and they may never get the preparation that they need. And in particular, when you look at women in the fields, as you suggest, electrical engineering, computer science are two fields that are of critical importance to us at Intel, and those are fields that are in fact losing interest among women and underrepresented minorities to a large extent. Do you have any suggestions for how we stem that tide?
How we stem the STEM tide? A couple of things. One, if you look at the way we are now trying to engage either underrepresented minorities or women, we're not doing a very good job of it. And I would argue it's precisely because of this. So if you look at, we talked to Janet Hugo, for example, who's the principal of the Arkansas Math and Science Academy. Janet will say girls do much better in these environments. I actually would like to get the folks from Dallas if they want to weigh in on this. But girls do much better in these high schools, according to Janet, because they don't feel like they're competing, that it's not, somehow the norm is you're not supposed to be smart because you're a girl or you're supposed to be cute or all this stuff. In these math and science academies, there's a high expectation for girls to do well. Another example we talk about in the report is Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon completely switched how they accepted people into their computer science department. Not to lower the standards, but to change how they brought people in. And what they were able to do, I guess 47%, 45%, something like that now are women in Carnegie Mellon's CS program, up from around 10%. Another key factor in this for both women and probably minorities is at the college level, there is a much greater ability to keep and attract and keep them in science fields if you're doing more interdisciplinary research. But there are very few incentives. One of the things I think is important, which we really miss in the debate, it's all K through 12 all the time. College plays a big role in this, and a lot of our report is about college because there's a huge switch-out and dropout rate in college. Kids who go into STEM and then don't finish it, and there's very little incentive for colleges to fix this problem because if they switch out to STEM to humanities, the college still gets money. They're still getting tuition payments. They're still getting FTEs from the state. So we need to give incentives to colleges to do it better. And there are really interesting college experiences around the country where they figured this out. They figured out how to get minorities and women and then how to retain them. But we haven't replicated those because there's no incentive to do it.
Let's go ahead and get into Dallas now, kind of partly to answer the question on what you're doing successfully, but also if you've got a question for Mr. Atkinson here.
Hello, my name is Javon Wells. I'm the principal at the School of Science and Engineering, and I wanted to speak to the comment he made about females in our school. We do have a little bit of imbalance. We have 60% male and 30% female, and we work on that in recruiting. However, in this environment, the females do very well. Our top 5 graduates this year are all female, and we have one that's number 1 here today, Julia Hosu. And I just want her to speak a little bit about her experience as a female in our school in an environment, not to feel any pressure, but to really be able to excel in an environment like the School of Science and Engineering.
Right, so hi, I'm Julia. As Ms. Wells said, I'm the valedictorian for our graduating class this year. And as she said, SEM in general is disproportionately, I guess, more male than female. But I've never felt that was something that hindered me in learning. I chose science and engineering because that was what interested me. And after I applied to the school, there weren't anything that said, okay, girls aren't supposed to be this good at it, or guys, here's are preferred, and stuff like that. So I felt that holistically, our teachers pay as much attention to everybody, and it doesn't matter in a classroom that there's only 2 girls in the classroom and the other 20 are guys, or the other way around in some classes. It's just, we're all students, we all get the same education, and the fact that I'm a girl and everybody else is a guy does not end up bothering me at the end of the day.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a closer look, just for people who might not know why we're talking about the school here, at the Science and Engineering Magnet High School in Dallas, Texas. The school is one of 6 magnet schools headquartered at the Yvonne Ewell Townview Center in the inner city of Dallas. 400 primarily minority students are selected for this program based on their achievements and their interests. What makes them unique and successful? Well, a fast-track curriculum that lets students advance at their own speed. That means they can take double the number of classes if they wish. A motivated and inspiring faculty, and state-of-the-art resources such as an electron microscope and a fully equipped engineering robotics lab. And students who are there to learn, let's meet some of them and hear about what they have to say about their school.
My name is Heng Nguyen. I am in the 12th grade. My career goals include becoming a mechanical engineer and minoring in Arabic or Chinese. At first I was like, I can't be a science and engineering chick. I can't do math. I can't do this. But the teachers here really inspire you to aim higher. And, well, here I am.
The ambiance here is just so amazing. Everybody wants you to learn. Everybody wants to learn. Nobody is trying to hold you back.
I think the biggest difference between this school and other schools is the expectations at the school. The students expect to take challenging classes. The teachers expect the students to excel. And there's just this expectation that everybody's going to study and everybody's going to learn. They have a few specialized pieces of equipment, the robotics equipment, the electron microscope. You can find that kind of equipment elsewhere as well. It's, I think, more than anything else, it's the level of classes that they take and the sequence of classes. As fast as the students can learn is as fast as they send them through the curriculum.
We have a really big community, a community that's really close-knit. We help each other with our homework. We have study groups formed every day, and such a cohesive student body helps us progress faster. There's a competitive edge, but there's also a sense of help, so that if you need something, you don't feel scared to go to your peers or your teachers.
I enjoy being who I am because of the Science and Engineering Magnet. Given the resources, they have changed my life, and I feel like I need to change the world.
All right, so the folks that are actually sitting there in Dallas with us are Glenn Sanford, an AP Statistics and Calculus teacher and the Texas Instruments STEM Fellow, Javon Wells, the school's principal, Joshua Newton, a Calculus teacher. They're joined by 3 students, seniors Jeremiah Johnson, Marcus Perez, and Julianne Hosu, who is the top-ranked student in the class of 2011. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so what kind of questions do you have? I mean, given some of the things that you've seen today, besides the PISA study, also what Rob's been talking about for the last few minutes. Go ahead. You're the valedictorian.
We get, obviously, our school, we have a STEM education. We focus on science and engineering. But earlier in grade school, we don't really separate science into biology, physics, or chemistry. We don't really separate the sciences, I guess, or even the math until higher up, maybe grades 6 and unto middle school. Are there any plans to start separating curriculum earlier so kids can get exposed to the sciences themselves more early on, not just like a textbook that has everything in it and you spend very little time on something?
There is a proposal that the President's Council of Science and Technology Advisors just came out with for the Obama administration, advocating for an expansion of middle schools like the Science and Engineering Magnet high schools, but only at the middle school level, where they would do essentially what you're doing, but do it at the middle school level. And there are some magnet middle schools that are doing that. So the idea would be now to expand that and do more of them.
Okay, let's go ahead and take some more questions from the audience. I saw a couple hands go. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kamzi Mattis, and I'm a former math and science teacher and currently an Einstein Fellow here in D.C. And I find it really timely that you mentioned things like robotics and IT, because this is Computer Science Education Week. And it's an act of Congress that encourages people to learn more about computing education, and it's something that I work on in my position as an Einstein Fellow. And I guess my question is that you mentioned the words advanced programming for some kids. And actually, in 10 years of teaching in public schools in New York City and in California, I never once encountered a single computer class ever being taught in any school that I either worked in, worked with, or had contact with. And so I'm just wondering what you think. Is there a sense of urgency to get more computing into maybe into the core curriculum? I know there's a group in D.C. that is advocating for that. And do you think that other people feel this sense of urgency, or do people think that, that's something that kids can learn once they get to college?
Okay, again, for the reason of the broadcast.
I was a misnomer when I said advanced programming. It's sort of basic at the best. And the other thing, they don't really teach computer science. Computer science is something quite different than what most high schools teach. I do find it troubling, given that if you look at the projections of where most jobs in the tech sector are going to be, a lot of them, over 70%, are in IT. Yet, as she said, it's almost not even existent at the high school level. Whether we should mandate it or not, we talk about that in the report, the pros and cons of putting it in the core curriculum. Given the fact that there's so much else in the core curriculum now and they're so hard to change, that is sort of the easiest way, just mandate it. Our approach actually is, I think that in the short run, mandating it might be okay, but in the long run, our argument is we've got to move away from mandates and much more to flexibility and letting kids who want to really engage in computer science have the ability to do that. Right now, it's very hard to do that.
Okay, we've got another question from our Dallas students. In the black shirt.
Yes, my name is Jeremiah Johnson, and at Science Engineering Magnet, we have teachers who have upper-level education, master's degrees, and doctorate degrees. I was wondering what incentives there for students such as us to come back once we graduate college and get our master's degrees to decide to come back to teach instead of going into the private sector.
Wow, good question.
Not much. Other than the fact that, A, you might want to be committed to it and you feel a personal obligation or interest, and secondly, just because you like doing that. But one of the things that we point out in the report is there's only about an 8% difference rate between teachers with degrees in the field and non-teachers without a degree. That's not really what's driving the difference here. And there's a lot of effort. If we just have everybody with teaching in the degree field they're teaching in, turns out that's not really the biggest explanatory factor of effective teaching. What is the biggest factor? We just don't know. It's something else. It's something that's intangible. So while I would commend Jeremiah to go into teaching, and I think it's important to do that, I think we're making a mistake if we just say we're really going to focus on getting teachers who have degrees. There's much more than that.
Okay. More questions from the audience here? Or was there somebody else from the back? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, young man.
Justin Bibb. I'm with the National Conference on Citizenship here in Washington, D.C. And my question stems from this notion of delayed gratification, which is a principle or value that's not really taught in a lot of underrepresented minority communities, specifically in large urban cities. How do we instill this notion of economic opportunity and wealth creation that's tied to these career opportunities in STEM into these communities and make it a systemic value-based system and also systemic in our policy frameworks moving forward?
That's probably a little beyond the scope of what we did in the study, but I would just add there are a number of different interesting programs in high schools now, and new kinds of high schools, particularly career academies in inner cities. I think part of the issue of motivation is we struggle with motivation. Why isn't there more motivation? And I guess I would offer if we all sort of forced everybody in this room to go tomorrow to start to have to read things that we have no interest in, like for me, English literature, I would really be, very, very bored. Now, if you want to give me economics books, okay, I'll devour those. And that's what we're doing in high school. So I think we got to start with motivation and interest and respect where kids are and give them the opportunities to follow up and say, that, look, I'm really interested in this and I'd like to continue it, as opposed to forcing every kid, for example, to take high school 4 years of English. Why is 4 years of English better than 2 years of English and 2 years of journalism? We need more journalists.
Right. Yes, ma'am, you had a question in the back.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Shee. I'm a Mirzayan Policy Fellow at the National Academy of Sciences. And my question kind of gets back to the discussion we had this morning about closing the gap between the high achievers and the low achievers. And the recommendation to create more specialized science and education magnet schools, especially at the middle school level or high school level even, where people are still exploring and still need to be taught basic skills. How do you think that creating specialized schools is going to affect that gap?
The gap of achievement. Well, I'd like to hear from the Dallas folks, but most of the math and science high schools in the country actually do teach English, and they teach reading, and they're not just every class is a physics class. So there is a breadth of the curriculum. But I think the second point is, at the end of the day, we have to think about this a little differently. We've thought about this as an education challenge. We have to think about it as an innovation challenge. what drives the U.S. economy fundamentally are innovation-based companies. That is ultimately what's going to determine our prosperity going forward. And right now, we're not doing a very good job of getting the fuel, i.e. the people who can work in there and create the new innovations, the new companies. And we've got to do that. And so I think the notion somehow that it's problematic to take kids in Dallas who are really passionate about this and give them an opportunity to do this, that somehow that's raising the achievement gap. Part of me says, I don't really care. I want them to do well, and if they doing well is going to help their achievement and help drive new companies and help drive new innovations that are going to power the economy and make our life better for everybody, I think that's definitely something we should be doing.
All right, we've got one more question from Dallas, and then we'll switch to colleges. Dallas, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Glenn Sanford. I'm a math teacher at Science Engineering. But I had a comment about that. While we emphasize science and math at our school, we also have a strong focus on English, as you mentioned earlier. And we believe that writing is one of the best skills that students can have in order to succeed after high school and college and in the workforce. We want students who can communicate well, their understanding of science and math once they get into the workforce. So we really have a strong push for that.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to turn our attention now to higher education. Olin is a small independent engineering college outside Boston, Massachusetts. While its focus is on engineering, its interdisciplinary curriculum emphasizes entrepreneurship and innovation. Students work on engineering problems for businesses in their community. Ananya Kajriwal from North India is a sophomore studying material science engineering. She's worked on a razor blade project for her failure analysis and prevention class.
I'm Ananya and I'm from Kanpur, which is in North India. I'm a sophomore and I'm an engineering with material science major. One of my favorite projects is the razor blade project I'm working on currently in failure analysis and prevention. So there's this company called Preserve, which is a plastic-based company. They focus on consumer products. So we're working to optimize these razor blades to find out what's going wrong with their blades and basically optimize the composition, the treatment process for these companies. So we've been running a series of tests, sharpness tests, micro hardness, looking at the microstructure and seeing exactly what they're doing to their blades that they should change. So it really feels like a real consulting experience, which is why I really like it. I want to go into entrepreneurship ultimately. I want to have a business in a technology intensive area, but something that combines materials and something that helps make a difference. What I think really distinguishes Olin from other schools is the fact that apart from just having a multidisciplinary curriculum, it's an interdisciplinary curriculum in the sense that we learn all these different threads, like we learn design, we learn entrepreneurship, we learn different liberal arts studies, and we learn how to weave these threads together, which is something that's very unique to Olin because we don't just create engineers here, we create innovators. And so I think Olin was definitely the perfect place for me to become a better person and become a well-developed person as a whole, which is why I wanted to come here.
All right, joining us from Olin College now are Lynn Andrea Stein, Professor of Computer and Cognitive Science and Director of Olin's Initiative for Innovation in Engineering Education, Elizabeth Threlkel, the sophomore from Evergreen, Colorado, seniors Oliver Haas from Klosterneuburg, Austria, and Marco Morales of San Ysidro, California, and Shara Kearns, Distinguished Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering and Founding Vice President for Innovation and Research. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right, let's, we've had conversations kind of including you or referencing you in the past. I mean, considering Rob's report and considering the PISA numbers, what's the first thing that leaps out at your mind?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind, and it's something that's been coming up, my name is Marco again, is this sort of theme of community, which at Olin we define as student engagement. And it's something that I think it stood out to me in terms of as they mentioned before, the Olin's results with the engagement survey. It actually is something that we take for granted a little bit, but it has a lot to do with that community aspect, that you can actually be a part of this community of learners where learning happens all the time, which I think is a problem in the sense that in K through 12 you generally have this phenomenon where learning is an on-off switch, and students are learning when they're in the classroom, and outside the classroom, they're done. They can finally go do video games or something else. But really, that perspective that learning can happen all over the place, in between classes, at other lectures that may not be in your discipline, is, I think, a really powerful thing. So anyways, that's one thing that stands out to me.
So really, even Secretary Duncan was talking about really the length of time spent throughout the year in the K through 12 level of not forgetting and so forth. But these guys are saying obviously that it's not just inside the classroom that you have to create this community. Do you find that in some of the schools that you've been talking to?
Again, you go and you look at the high school, the science high schools, or places like Olin. I think part of the magic that makes that work, besides the great teachers and the faculty and all of that and the students, is that everybody in this environment is all in the same focus. They're all doing something similar, and so they are able to get sort of more. The sum of the parts the whole is more than the sum of the parts here. So I think that really is a big part of it. Right now in high school, you're just in these big, massive high schools. There's no sense of community. There's no sense of engagement and excitement in a lot of high schools or colleges, frankly. And getting a place like Olin where you've got kids who are all committed to this and then they can learn from each other, I think that is a big part of it.
Olin, a question I also had was, how do you kind of instill this culture of entrepreneurship? I mean, what is it that you're doing that automatically hits home to kids when they come in, that they're not just expected to walk out with a diploma, but really try to think for themselves?
Okay.
We can build off each other, I guess. The first thing I'd say to that is we have a heavily design-based curriculum. So more than just a project-based curriculum where you might be given a problem as a team to work on, you work on that in a very hands-on way. Our curriculum very much encourages things like opportunity identification. So we sort of envision this see this as three phases. We understand the human side of the problem we're trying to solve. Then we're given the technological skills to figure out solutions to solve that problem. And then we think about the implementational side. So the entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial thought and action that can help us take the technologies that we build and that we develop and really think about how those can come to market. And I think that entire spectrum, along with a lot of opportunities to gain exposure to entrepreneurship, is a great way that we pick up a lot of that skill and a lot of that experience.
We start with authentic, multidisciplinary problems that really don't have any boundaries, such as this is a calculus problem or this is a computer science problem. They're too complex for that. And we have a guided building of the complexity and ambiguity of those problems throughout 4 years. Shara Kearns.
Hi, thank you. And what about the young woman in the center? I mean, how do you, for example, work with local businesses in the community? It was kind of one of the introductions that we gave you, but give us an example of that.
Lynn, you're on. Go.
So we have a number of projects, and they range from service opportunities. We have some of our students are in the local high schools or local middle schools or local elementary schools. There's a wonderful corporation in town that employs largely senior citizens that one of my colleagues is working with. We have students who are working on projects that involve people from other schools in the area, other colleges and universities, but also involve colleges and universities around the world. In fact, some of our students were in Ghana last summer working in a multidisciplinary project there. So we work really hard to try, even though we're small, to have lots and lots of partnerships that bring lots and lots of students from around the world and around the local community in to engage in this kind of activity. One of the things I like best is that when I'm walking down the hall and I see a group of students excitedly talking, I have no idea whether they're working on a problem set for my class or whether they're working on the next thing that is going to change AIDS treatment in South Africa, or whether they're working on launching the new IT mobile product.
Okay, so in the audience here, consider this a free Skype and a better conversation tool. But do you have any questions for our folks in Olin? Bueller?
I'll just make one comment.
Yes, go ahead.
And to me, Harry, the key thing about Olin, which is why I think it's such a really great model, is we talk a lot about innovation in education. We almost talk about nothing on innovation in pedagogy. And Olin is about innovation in how they teach, how they structure that. There are no departments. As you heard, you learn about complex problems. That's the way we should be teaching things. The other key thing that I think one of the gentlemen said there is that they learn problems with design and projects all early on. And if we could eliminate the whole STEM shortage in this country, if we just could eliminate STEM switch out in college. So the number of kids who go to college, they're ready to do STEM, they want to graduate in it, they switch out. And when do they switch out? They switch out after their freshman year. And the key indicator of why they switch out is that they don't have real-world experience. They don't have real research. They're stuck in these big, boring lecture classrooms. It's all sort of foreign and obtuse. Mm-hmm. At Olin, they're actually working on real problems. So if you want to get kids engaged in college and keep them engaged, we need pedagogical innovation. And that's, to me, what Olin is really exemplifies.
A question for the Olin students that kind of comes naturally from this. When you walked into school versus when you're walking out or when you've seen the peers walking out, have they stayed fairly true to what they've been interested in?
I found a lot of students have stayed true to what they're interested in the fact that everyone still is quote-unquote an engineer. However, most people's interests develop over time through various projects and through their various interests, and that's something that's really interesting about Olin is that from freshman year, we don't have a standardized curriculum in that everyone takes calculus and physics and chemistry. We actually just, our first semester freshman year, we take classes like Design Nature, where they give us a project where we basically build a toy for a class of fourth graders, thinking about both their needs and all of the physics, math, science, and engineering that goes into building such a device. Allowing the students at Olin to explore all of their subjects of interest via a project like that is really something that allows them to self-direct their education and figure out what aspects of engineering they actually enjoy. And by allowing people to explore more of the entrepreneurial side or more of the societal and human needs side of engineering, more people stay true to being engineers and really follow through with being passionate about engineering as a whole.
Okay, we've got a
absolutely, and I'd just like to add, I think
Go ahead.
It really helps you, the idea of self-direction really helps you mold your educational experience to your passions and to your interests. And I think that's what keeps students engaged and what keeps us excited about engineering throughout the 4 years.
Okay, we've got a question back here. Yes, sir.
My name is Fred Belmont. I'm a 7th grade math teacher in Northbrook, Illinois. This is a question. Before I became a math teacher, I was a serial entrepreneur, several different companies. Serial entrepreneur. What sorts of successes have the Olin students, once they've gotten out, experienced, whether it's in technology products or toys or non-technology, whatever they make or build, or services?
So every student at Olin starts and runs a business. That is our Fundamentals of Business and Entrepreneurship course, and it lays the framework for people like Marco, who, as far as we can know so far, has started at least 5 ventures already. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I'll start off by saying it depends how you count exactly how many it actually has been, but there are a number of students who graduate, and I think it's around 10% at least, who explore their own ventures or their own projects directly out of Olin. I know that that's certainly an option for me, possibly, given all the things that I've done at Olin. At one point between my sophomore and junior years, I took a year off with 5 other Olin students to start an education company because we were excited about it and we wanted a whole, as Ollie mentioned earlier, people all the way to product. How do you get from point A to point B experience? And it turns out that entrepreneurship and companies are a really great means of getting that whole cycle, and engineering is a part of that. But I think that opportunity is certainly something a lot of students do take advantage of.
All right, thanks to the folks from Olin for joining us. And if for the studio audience here, the president of Olin College is here as well, in case you want to bug him with questions after the fact. In the meantime, we want to also say thank you to Rob Atkinson from ITIF for your time today, and for the audience for your questions as well. So to learn what this all means for America's future, I'm going to turn the program over now to Walter Isaacson, head of the Aspen Institute. It's a nonpartisan educational and policy studies institute here in Washington, D.C. He joins us now to interview Tom Friedman, the author and New York Times columnist. Friedman's won 3 Pulitzer Prizes for his international reporting and commentary. He writes frequently about education and our global economy. Gentlemen.
Hey, thanks, sir. Thanks.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Only 3 Pulitzers. You win a Pulitzer every day from us. Tom puts more ideas into the American bloodstream than anybody else I know. Thank you for being with us, Tom Friedman.
What a great discussion.
Thank you. We were talking a lot about the need to get the best kids in America, the smartest kids, to do what the ambassador from Finland's country does, which is they go into teaching. Your daughter went into teaching. How do we get people to emulate Orly, your daughter?
Gosh, that's interesting. Well, as you know, Walter, her mother was a school teacher, so I think part of it's in the genes. She saw that was something that was high aspiring, knowledge worker, and significant. She had that in her house every day, and I think so. She was lucky in that sense. You know, I'm so impressed at what Secretary Duncan, has talked about in terms of the need to try to make teachers knowledge workers. In the PISA study, I believe it's in the PISA study, you'll see, or the people who've done it can tell you. In Shanghai, actually, the top teacher is called famous teacher. Okay, yeah. So they're really elevating,
it's like in South Korea calling them nation builders.
Nation building, exactly right. So, and I think everything we do to elevate the importance and respect of this profession.
She came in through Teach for America,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, Orly to Teach for America. But at the same time, I thought there was a subtext to the discussion here, which I really liked, the last one that Rob was talking about. And I'm a believer in what I call the PTA system, which is that we really want to do everything we can to empower and enable our teachers to be the best they can. But I think everything they do will not be it's all necessary, but it won't be sufficient if you don't have students who come to school ready to learn, and parents who are putting the highest expectations on those students. So I see it as a kind of collaborative effort. This is about PTA. That I don't know much about education reform. I don't know which technology, which curriculum change we need. All I know is if you had kids who came to school really ready and eager to learn and understand the importance of learning, and you had parents every day reinforcing that message, every bit of education reform we're trying to do would be amplified. I was talking to the OECD people last night, and they've got another study, actually, that they've been doing. They've been tracking back the most successful 15-year-olds and looking back 5 years, and they find something very interesting, and that is the ones that are most successful had parents who only, in some cases, did one thing. How was your day at school? Okay. So just that simple question.
Wait. Okay? Can't that become an excuse, though, when you're in a community and the teachers and the schools say it's not our fault because we don't have good parents?
Well, I think everyone's trying to find an excuse. The parents are saying it's all on the teachers. I'm going to send my kid to school. You parent him, okay? The kids, will make their excuse. It's all boring. And the teachers and principals and educators can make their excuse. So what I'm saying, it's got to be no excuses all the way around. That's all I'm trying to say. I think there's been a little too much focus on the teacher part of that. No excuses for teachers, and not enough on the parents and on the students. I think this has got to be a collaborative effort all the way around.
In New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, we had a problem, which was everybody had left, the schools had come down. People started coming back, and our schools got better. One reason they got better, though, was not simply because parents were there, because a lot of times the parents weren't around after the hurricane. Kids came back first and had to stay, with extended family members. It's that the schools became community centers. They really took on a lot of the work. They were open till 6 p.m. Shouldn't we be keeping our schools open till 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., make them community centers, make them do that whole...
I think that's a great idea. I think the lesson I take from that, Walter, would be a slightly different one. It reminds me a little when I was in Beirut in 1982 in the Israeli invasion. There was an insane asylum, basically, that all the staff ran away, and they say the patients got much better. Right. And I think there is some logic to it. I actually explored this.
Taking
responsibility. See, I'm a big believer. In whether it's in local politics, education, or geopolitics, life is about ownership. Okay, when people take ownership of their future, whether it's a student, a parent, a teacher, a principal, a community, good things happen. You've worked a lot on the Middle East through the Aspen Institute and done some wonderful things there. And I have a saying about the Middle East that the Middle East only puts a smile on your face when it starts with them. Okay, so Camp David succeeded because it started with them. Oslo succeeded to some because it started with them. The Sunni Arab awakening in Iraq succeeded because it started with them. When somebody else is the them, when someone else is there and wanting it more than they do, whether it's educators or parents or students or diplomats, you're always going to be fighting, I think, that problem. So it doesn't surprise me.
Interesting theory. And one way to allow people to take ownership is when they can have a choice, as you do when you go to supermarkets, as you do when you go to doctors or anything else. And I'm not talking about charter schools here. I'm talking about what we did in New Orleans and other places, which is if a school's not good, the parent has a right to move the kid to another school. You have choice within a public or public and charter school system. Couldn't we allow people to take more responsibility if we gave them more choices so that they could be picking the school that's right for the kid?
Yeah, well, my wife teaches first grade reading in a public school. She's also chairman of the Seed Foundation, which is a charter private boarding school here in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. So I think we want to, I'm all for choice. I think I speak for Ann in this, as long as we're working constantly to improve both. But I don't want choice to be because we're just giving up on public schools. That would be a...
Could we have choice within public school systems in Washington, for example?
I certainly would be. I don't know about the technicalities of it, but I think choice is very important. I mean, the most powerful column I can say I think I've done is in 15 years, powerful for me to have done was I did a column about the lottery for the Seed School, which is one of the things Davis Guggenheim, saw and influenced him. It was 5 years ago, and I was at the Baltimore Seed School when they had the first lottery. And when you see parents and grandparents, coming there, clutching their number, hoping that this life lottery will throw out a bingo ball. It's literally a life bingo that will give their kid an exit ticket from a failing public school. Anyone who tells you that parents don't care about this or, somehow people from underprivileged background. I mean, you talk to the Seed people, you'll see mothers strung out on crack who will come with an application, to get their kid into that school because they know that's a ticket to a different life for their kids.
Let me open it up a bit. Questions here or elsewhere? Yes, our principal from, where are you a principal?
Theodore Roosevelt High School, Kent, Ohio. And
Kent.
Tom, I had your book when it first came out, and I passed it on to every educator I could ever find.
Thank you, sir. And you could ask them to buy it, which would actually...
No, which book was that?
You know which book it was because I think it was an awakening.
I appreciate it.
You said a number of things that I'd like you to reflect back on. I'm going to share with you. I think what you're suggesting is the lack of an American ethos. It appears that in America today, a lot of people, they don't see education as being necessary. They sometimes see education as a necessary evil or something that you have to go through. And I think that lack of an American ethos is what I was suggesting to the Secretary, that there in America today, I think some of the other countries that are emerging with education, there is that national identity, that they are nation builders, that educators, they're doing something to build their country, to move their country forward. Right now, I don't see that as an educator. And I'd like to respond also a little bit to the idea of being able to of choice. In Ohio, we have something called open enrollment. And every year I get 100, maybe 150 applications for kids wanting to come to our public high school. Interesting thing, we've been doing this for about 7 or 8 years now. And I find it real fascinating that a lot of kids who struggle from their other school system and they come into our school, they still struggle. That it's almost an exact percentage in terms of how kids, are in schools. So I think when we talk about choice, and I'd like to get at that parent piece a little bit. I don't blame parents. I wish they would be coming and screaming at me, wanting to have a better education. But how do we begin to have this conversation about the American ethos? How do we have this conversation about
why we take on the question of the American ethos?
Yeah. Well, you're so right. I'm a really big believer that everything starts with knowing what world you're living in. Okay. People come to me and say, okay, you wrote The World is Flat in 2004. Did you get it right? I say, no, I got it wrong. They say, that's what we thought. What'd you get wrong? The world is so much flatter than I thought. Okay. All right. Who knew that Iceland turned out to be a hedge fund with glaciers? I mean, who knew? But who knew that was going on? Okay. The world is so much flatter than you think. And these changes are happening so much faster. And so the importance of political leadership, explaining to people what world you're in. So what world are we in? We're in a world in very, very simple terms. You can see this in the PISA introduction, where the labor force has been bifurcated. We have this thing, skills bias technology. What does that mean? It basically means if you are working in a non-routine, if you have skills to do non-routine, high analytical, high critical thinking, high creative thinking work, you're enabled by technology. I'm writing another book now. I don't have a research assistant. I have Google. So, I mean, and so you're enabled by technology. If you're in non-routine, lower-skilled work, okay, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, you're going to be fine. Your wages will depend on your personal productivity and the local economy. But if you're in the middle now, you don't just have a less good job or a less remunerative job. You have no job. All right. So what does that mean? It means that education in America 50 years ago was about sorting. Andreas, if he's still here, made that point, which is that we identified the really smart people, we sorted them out, and everybody else could be on the assembly line. Mm-hmm. Well, the assembly line is now either a factory, a robot, or someone in China. So that's not there anymore. So everybody today has to raise their game. So what is the meaning of the flat world? The meaning of the flat world is this. Everything is becoming a commodity except that. See, if I've got that now, I can actually go to Delta in Taiwan, and they'll design that for me. I skip over to Hangzhou, and Alibaba, Jack Ma, he will find me a Chinese manufacturer to make that for me. Jump back to Amazon.com in Seattle, and Jeff Bezos will do my fulfillment and delivery. Go to Craigslist, find an accountant, and go to Freelancer.com, and they'll do my logo. Okay? Mm-hmm. So everything today is a commodity except that. So the value of that now, and Rob referred to innovation is more and more, because what happens is we become more productive. We are able to do more things with fewer people for less money. That means the only way we grow as an economy is have more people inventing more things for more of us to do with fewer people with less money. And that's the cycle we have to be in. Okay, so it all goes back to, you got to know what world you're in. And right now in America, I think the motto of America today is dumb as we want to be. We're dumb as we want to be, okay? Because we're American, we're on top of the world, and we're exceptional. So see, we actually are having one of the most moronic debates I can ever think of. We actually have people like Sarah Palin attacking the president for not saying we're exceptional enough. So what happened is exceptionalism has become another American entitlement. It's something else you get without having to pay for it, okay? Mm-hmm. We now have debated doing the work to be exceptional with talking about how exceptional we are. That's a really bad place to be. That's a sign of the apocalypse, okay? All right? That's not where this country
When you
should
talk
be.
about that, you mean innovation.
Yeah,
How
exactly.
do you spur innovation?
Sparking ideas. Well, again, this was a subtext of the conversation, and I heard it from the young people. They're really good to have math and science and all of that, but never forget the liberal arts. The liberal arts is the sort, because where does innovation come from? Where does creativity come from? Usually comes from, I think I can speak for you and myself as people who've written books. It actually comes from mashing together two different ideas. So my creativity comes from, I studied Arabic and Middle East history in college, then I covered foreign affairs, then I learned about technology, then energy and environment, and mashing them all together, I can come up with a synthesis that somebody else can't. Well, I think the way you start getting that is by having a liberal arts education. Mm-hmm. So we need more math, we need more science. I've never met a good application writer who didn't know calculus, but at the same time, don't forget reading, music, art, literature. Those are such important sources of that.
And let's remember, math and science are also creative.
Oh, absolutely. They're different. Absolutely.
We're going to Olin, speaking of the cool people at Olin, and they're on both screens. So speak up.
Olin?
Hi. So based on Mr. Friedman's comment right now that the world is actually flatter than flat, I'm wondering a bit about the conversation we're having now is very much related around competitiveness. And I'm wondering about sort of the concept of compatibility and whether U.S. students can be prepared to be more compatible in this very flat world. I think in the context of Olin, the holistic engineering experience that we were telling you about before does prepare us well. And related on the comment that Mr. Friedman, you just made, about the liberal arts. That represents about a third of our educational experience, and I think that definitely is a huge part of what empowers us to operate in this globalized world.
Right.
Well, I think that's terrific, and I would like to clone Olin, 1,000 times over, basically, because so what happens in this flat world is your first job out of college may be manager of India supply chain for a division of Walmart or Costco. In other words, we're in a world now where it's a 24-hour cycle, it's a 24-hour innovation cycle, it's a 24-hour manufacturing cycle, something that starts in California and then gets handed over to Shanghai and then gets handed over to New Delhi and then gets handed over to Berlin and then gets handed back to America. That's really where, because there's really just two rules of the flat world. Rule number one is whatever can be done will be done. Mm-hmm. The only question is, will it be done by you or to you? Yeah. Okay, but just don't think it won't be done. So if it can be done, that I can actually manufacture a product by harnessing a global supply chain, the best brains in the world, then people and companies will do that. And of course, they already are. And I think the second important rule of the flat world is that the most important competition in the flat world is no longer between countries and countries. It's no longer between companies and companies, although that's still important. The most important competition is between you and your own imagination. Mm-hmm. Because what you imagine now, you as an individual can now act on farther, faster, deeper, cheaper than ever before. And therefore, education, starting from primary education, that encourages and nurtures inspiration, innovation, digging inside yourself, because you can now act on that like never before as an individual.
And I think the corollary to those rules about the flat world comes from the PISA study, which is if we're number 17 or number 20 or 23rd in education, you have to be a pretty reality-distorting exceptionalist to think we can have the most exceptional economy, but the 23rd best education system.
Yeah, I mean, President Obama said this very well. The country that out-educates us today will out-compete us tomorrow.
Tom Friedman,
thank you very much. Well, thanks so much. Thank you.
Cool. And now I turn it to you, either of you, right?
Right.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you again, Walter. Thanks so much, Tom. I believe all of our guests have given us plenty to think about. Thanks to everyone online and in our studio audience who joined in the conversations. To learn more about this subject and continue the conversation, log on to theinnovationeconomy.org. Visit the PBS NewsHour website or the websites for Intel, ITIF, or the Aspen Institute. And tweet your thoughts using the hashtag #EdForInnovation. That's ED, the number 4 for innovation. On behalf of the PBS NewsHour and our partners, I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thank you so much for watching.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.